Chapter 871. Auctioning the Prison Pagoda. When he heard that Fu Wenzong wanted to auction the prison pagoda, Yi Xian did not know whether to laugh or cry. Wasn't this a trick that he often played? As if thinking of something, Yi Xian's expression gradually became serious. He had originally wanted to use Fu Wenzong to fight against the Worldwide Academy, but he did not think that the Worldwide Academy would not fall for his trick. Now that the Worldwide Academy was auctioning the prison pagoda, it was equivalent to them withdrawing from it. Furthermore, they could profit from the prison pagoda. Thinking of this, Yi Xian shook his head. His plan was good, but the Worldwide Academy was not stupid. But then again, for such a large sect, how could they be a bunch of idiots? Then there was a problem. Should he take back the prison pagoda or not? After thinking for a while, he decided not to take it back. If he took it back now, the entire fifth dimension would chase after him. If these people could not find him, they would definitely target the fourth dimension. Furthermore, there was no need to take it back. Didn't Fu Wenzong want to auction the prison pagoda? Why not beat him at his own game? As he thought of this, Yi Xian was about to leave, but at this time his brows suddenly furrowed. The next moment he directly entered into the realm of emptiness. The moment Yi Xian disappeared, an old man appeared where he was originally. He recognized this old man. It was Xiahou. The other party was looking for him? Yi Xian frowned. At this time there was a hint of doubt in Xiahou's eyes. Where is he? Saying this, he turned and disappeared. Yi Xian still did not come out. At this time the Xiahou that had disappeared suddenly reappeared. He swept his gaze around, then disappeared. In the darkness, Yi Xian was silent. Why would Xiahou come to find him? Furthermore, he felt that he had come with ill intentions. When did he offend the Xiahou family? Without thinking too much, Yi Xian turned and left. On this day, Fu Wenzong suddenly became lively. People came one after another. However, Fu Wenzong was very cautious. He was very strict with the people who came, so Yi Xian could only sneak in. It must be said that Fu Wenzong was really huge. Even a small mountain gate occupied an entire mountain range. After entering the mountain gate, one's field of vision suddenly opened up. In front of the mountain range was a plain, and at the end of the line of sight stood a towering mountain. The entire mountain was like a talisman that pierced through the clouds. Maofu. It was said that this mountain was naturally formed, without the slightest trace of man-made carvings. Back then, when ancestor Fu Wenzong passed by this place, he took a fancy to this place and established his sect here. On Mount Talisman there were 18 large halls and 108 small halls. This place was no smaller than a city. More and more people gathered in front of the main hall of Mount Talisman. However, ordinary people were stopped in front of the main hall, while those with status were invited into the Talisman Hall. Yi Xian was hidden in the crowd. He didn't show himself, nor did he dare to show himself. This wasn't an ordinary place. If he was recognized, it would be difficult for him to escape. At this moment, the Worldwide Academy arrived. The person who arrived was Qin Tian. Qin Tian arrived in front of the Talisman Hall and looked around. He knew that Yi Xian was definitely hiding in the dark. However, even with his ability, he couldn't sense Yi Xian. He had already sent people to investigate Yi Xian's concealment technique. Only by finding out the origin of this concealment technique could he think of a way to counter it. Otherwise, Yi Xian would forever be invincible. At this moment, sect leader of Fu Wenzong, Xianxia, suddenly came out to welcome them. He smiled as he walked to Qin Tian and said, "Welcome, Patriarch Qin." Qin Tian said with a smile, "Brother Shin, how have you been?" Xianxia smiled faintly. Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent and no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as the crown prince will be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a young man with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the Yi clan's elders. Why? At this moment, a timid voice suddenly sounded in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling, Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to dismiss Yi Xian, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall and said timidly, "Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is the crown prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason?" The Great Elder looked coldly at Yi Ling. "This is a matter of the clan, what are you interrupting for? Leave." Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the Great Elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, "Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince. This is truly unfair. Impudent." The Great Elder suddenly raged. "Whether he's crippled or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this time the new crown prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. "He should be flogged 30 times as a warning." The Great Elder replied coldly, "Then flog him 30 times. Very quickly 2 Yi clan's guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years and even now he's fighting for the clan. This is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new crown prince Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, "Young master, Yi Lang inherits the title of crown prince. What are you shouting for?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly turned red and swollen. However, she did not cry and only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed. "This subordinate Zhang Mu greets the crown prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the crown prince I'll need 10 guards. From now on you'll be my guard." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and hurriedly bowed deeply. "This subordinate will go through fire and water for the crown prince. I'll do anything for you." Yi Lang nodded. "Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Do not hold back. Understood?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang and when he saw the killing intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this time Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something and he suddenly stopped. Within the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. He was wearing a tight-fitting robe that was tattered and covered in blood. This person was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from the Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a cold smile. Within the ancestral hall, all the elders were frowning. The Great Elder narrowed his eyes and his face was dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time Yi Xian was like a ferocious tiger leaping in front of him. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Ping. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop there. He rushed towards Zhang Mu again. At this time Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man. How dare you?" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh. Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, "Prince, save me." Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced apart. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, tears welled up in her eyes. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Ping. Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides there were the Yi clan elders. "Why?" Right at this moment, a slightly timid voice suddenly resounded within the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This little girl was called Yiling and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that Yi Xian was to be replaced, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yiling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yiling bowed to everyone in the hall and asked timidly, "Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason?" The Great Elder looked at Yiling coldly. "This is a matter of the clan, what are you interrupting for? Leave." Yiling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the Great Elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, "Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince." Impudent. The Great Elder suddenly raged. "Whether he's stripped or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this time the new prince Yilang suddenly laughed. "He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others." The Great Elder replied coldly, "Then flog him 30 times. Very quickly 2 Yi clan guards rushed in. Yiling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years and even now he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yilang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, "Young master Yilang inherits the position of prince. What are you shouting for?" As he spoke he raised his hand and slapped Yiling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded and the right side of Yiling's face instantly swelled up. However, she did not cry and only covered her cheek tightly. Yilang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed. "Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince." Yilang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the prince I'll need 10 guards. From now on you'll be my guard." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and hurriedly bowed deeply. "I'll go through fire and water for the prince and I'll do anything for you." Yilang nodded. "Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Don't hold back, understand?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yilang and when he saw the murderous intent in Yilang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yiling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something and suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe and the robe was tattered and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Yi Xian who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yilang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall the elders frowned. The Great Elder narrowed his eyes and his face was dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yiling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He hurriedly looked at Yilang and was about to speak. At this time Yi Xian was like a ferocious tiger, and before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Ping. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. Yilang did not stop there and charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time Yilang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you!" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yilang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, "Your man?" As he spoke he stomped down on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yiling's side. Seeing Yiling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced apart. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yiling saw Yi Xian, tears welled up in her eyes. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Ping. Chapter 872. The Tao of Runes. Yi Xian began to learn the Tao of Runes from Fu Shaoan. To Yi Xian's surprise, although they were in the hall, no one noticed them. Not only that, there were people who came but did not seem to notice them. He knew it must be because of Fu Xiaotian. The strength of a person like him could only be described as unpredictable. It was true that his immeasurable sword was ineffective against the person in front of him. After all, even Qin Tian could not notice him. As Fu Xiaotian said, the Tao of Runes was not particularly difficult. At least it was not that difficult in his opinion. Moreover, with Fu Xiaotian's guidance, his speed of improvement in the Tao of Runes could only be described as godly. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. The auction officially began. Yi Xian did not pay attention to the auction. He had fallen in love with the Tao of Runes. Now he was trying to draw a talisman. Moreover, Fu Xiaotian directly asked him to draw a purple talisman. That was too high a starting point. The Hall of Runes. More and more people were gathered in the hall. However, those who entered the hall were all powerful and influential people. As for those who were weaker and had no status, they were outside the hall. However, they could still see what was going on in the hall. Inside the hall, Xianxia glanced at the crowd and said with a smile, "Thank you everyone for attending the auction held by me, Fu Wenzong. The auction is very simple. The highest bidder wins." At that moment, an old man suddenly said, "Sect leader Shen, according to the old man's knowledge, your sect has never lacked money. Here's the question. What is it that your sect is looking for in this auction?" Xianxia smiled faintly. "The secret crystal." Hearing that, everyone's expression changed. The secret crystal. This was a special material that was extremely useful. Kibbe said that rune masters and blacksmiths loved it the most, especially rune masters. This was because if a rune master wanted to refine a purple talisman or above, he would need this dense crystal. These crystals were extremely difficult to obtain. To obtain them, one could only go to one place. The edge of the void dimension. Every year, a few mysterious crystals would leak out from the void dimension. Although they were not many, they were very few. Moreover, every time a mysterious crystal appeared, there would be a fight over it. Kibbe said that the most valuable currency in the fifth dimension was these mysterious crystals. With the secret crystals, you can exchange anything, even divine weapons and orange talismans. Now that Fu Wenzong had requested to exchange crystals for the World Prison Pagoda, it could be said that this directly stopped most people because not many people had crystals. Xianxia continued, "Ladies and gentlemen, let's not waste any more time. Let's begin. The base price is 1,000 secret crystals, and each increment must be no less than 100 secret crystals. The highest bidder wins." Everyone in the hall was silent. Xianxia slowly closed his eyes. He was not in a hurry. It was the others who should be in a hurry. Right at this moment, a nearby black-clothed old man suddenly said, 1,200. Someone made a bid. Everyone looked at the black-robed old man. The black-robed old man's entire body was shrouded in black and he wore half a mask. He was hiding his identity. Xianxia glanced at the black-robed old man, but did not say a word. Qin Tian, on the other hand, had no intention of making a bid. Soon people began to call out bids. In a short while, the price had reached 2,500 secret crystals, and it was still rising. Inside Fu Wenzong's ancestral hall, Yi Xian was still learning talisman Dao from Fu Xiaoan. He was currently drawing a purple talisman, and he had already failed 3 times. In front of Yi Xian, Fu Xiaotian watched quietly. He would give some pointers from time to time. Just like that, Yi Xian quickly drew the first purple talisman. However, Fu Xiaotian shook his head, not very satisfied. Yi Xian looked at Fu Xiaotian. Fu Xiaotian said softly, "The quality is not good enough. We must make every talisman perfect. Only with perfection can we unleash its true power. This talisman of yours can only be considered a defective product. Start again." Yi Xian nodded. Then he began to draw again. At this moment, Fu Xiaotian suddenly looked out of the hall. He frowned. That pagoda. Obviously, he had already sensed the existence of the prison pagoda. In the talisman hall, the price had already risen to 5,000 secret crystals. One had to admit that this was already an astronomical figure. Even someone as wealthy as Fu Wenzong could not take out so many secret crystals at once. It was worth mentioning that until now, Qin Tian had not made a single bid. It was as if he was watching a show. Naturally, Xianxia knew what Qin Tian meant. No matter who obtained the prison pagoda, they would eventually have to beg the Worldwide Academy. This was because the Worldwide Bookstore was located in the Worldwide Academy. Therefore Qin was not in a hurry at all. However, Xianxia was not in a hurry either. After all, he had already given up on the prison pagoda. Once he got his hands on the treasure, he would hand it over. By then Fu Wenzong would be able to escape. In a short while, the price of the prison pagoda had reached 8,200 secret crystals. The one who made the bid was still the old man in black. At this moment, the crowd was even more curious about the old man's identity. In the end, the prison pagoda was sold for 9,000 secret crystals. At the moment when the deal was made, Xianxia looked at the old man in black. The old man pointed his finger and a storage ring appeared in front of Xianxia. Inside the storage ring, there were exactly 9,000 secret crystals. 9,000 secret crystals. Xianxia took a deep look at the old man in black. Only those few super forces could take out 9,000 secret crystals in one go. Xianxia nodded slightly. He pointed his finger and a Xiaota appeared in front of the old man in black. It was the prison pagoda. Qin looked at Xianxia. Brother Xin, you're quite decisive. Xianxia smiled. Everyone, this item has been handed over. If you want it, don't come after me, Fu Wenzong. Everyone in the temple looked at the old man in black. However, the old man in black ignored them and turned around to leave. At this moment, Qin suddenly smiled. How should I address you, sir? The old man in black ignored Qin. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared into the horizon. The crowd in the temple also dispersed. Some of them followed after him. Inside the temple, Xianxia looked at Qin. The latter smiled. Brother Xin, please do me a favor. Xianxia smiled. A favor? Qin nodded. There's something that I need Brother Xin's help with. Xianxia said, tell me about it. Qin smiled. If I'm not wrong, this Zhou Xian should still be in Fu Wenzong. I want to drag him out. However, I need your sect's help. Xianxia fell silent. Qin said, of course, it's not for nothing. As he spoke, he opened his palm and a black ancient book appeared in his hand. This item was left behind by my teacher. It records some of his insights and insights into runes. I believe that your sect needs this item. Upon hearing this, Xianxia's expression became serious. The prophet's attainments in runes could be said to be the best in the 5 dimensions. Even Patriarch Fu Wenzong was inferior to him. All these years, Fu Wenzong had been asking the Worldwide Academy for the ancient books on runes left behind by the prophet. However, the Worldwide Academy had never agreed. Now, however, Qin had taken the initiative to take it out. Xianxia was silent for a moment. How can I help? Qin offer was a temptation that he could not refuse. Neither could Fu Wenzong. This was because the ancient books left behind by the prophet might contain the method to create 7 colored talismans. Qin smiled. It's very simple. I need to borrow a treasure from your sect. Xianxia looked at Qin. The God's Eyes Talisman. Qin nodded. That's it. Xianxia was silent. Qin looked at the ancient book in his hand and smiled. As long as you are willing to borrow it once, I will give it to you immediately. Xianxia was silent. The God's Eyes Talisman. This was a 7-colored talisman that had been created by Patriarch Fu Wenzong, Fu Shaoan. This talisman had a very powerful ability, which was to use it as the God's Eyes Talisman to observe everything in the world. Zhou Xian's concealment technique was unparalleled. Even Qin could not do anything about it. The only way to find Zhou Xian was to use the God's Eyes Talisman. At this moment Qin suddenly said, as long as you find that Zhou Xian, leave the rest to me. Fu Wenzong will not suffer any loss. When he spoke up to here, he paused slightly and smiled. Brother Qin, according to my knowledge, your Tao of Talismans has stagnated for a long time. This ancient book in my possession is an opportunity for you. Not only is it an opportunity for you, it's an opportunity for your talisman sect as well. Why are you still hesitating? Xianxia was silent for a moment and nodded. All right. Just as Qin had said, he could not resist this temptation. Seeing that Xianxia had agreed, Qin smiled and said, then I'll have to trouble you. Xianxia did not say anything else. He opened his palm and a 7-colored talisman appeared in his hand. When Qin saw this 7-colored talisman, His expression instantly turned serious. A 7-colored talisman. Even he did not dare to underestimate the power of this talisman. Xianxia slowly closed his eyes and muttered something. After a while, the space in the area started to ripple like waves. A moment later, he frowned slightly. In the ancestral shrine. As soon as he finished speaking, he disappeared. Qin Tian also disappeared. Soon, the group appeared in front of Fu Wenzong's ancestral shrine. Xianxia stared at the ancestral shrine. He had just walked over when an invisible force blocked his way. Xianxia was stunned. What's going on? At the side, Qin Tian suddenly waved his sleeve, and a powerful force shook the ancestral shrine. However, the force disappeared without a trace before it could even get close to the ancestral shrine. Qin Tian narrowed his eyes slightly when he saw this. A moment later he looked at Xianxia, but the latter shook his head. He did not know what was going on either. At this moment, the door of the ancestral shrine suddenly opened and a man walked out. It was Zhou Xian. After Zhou Xian walked out, he glanced at Qin Tian and then looked at Xianxia and smiled. According to seniority, you should call me Little Ancestral Master. Everyone was speechless. Chapter 873. Little Grand Master? Everyone was dumbfounded. Xianxia looked at Zhou Xian. Are you toying with the old man? Zhou Xian shook his head. Sect leader Xian, someone wants to see you. Come in. After saying that, he turned around and walked into the hall. At this time, Qin Tian suddenly made a move. He grabbed at Zhou Xian and a powerful force swept towards Zhou Xian. At the same time, the space around Zhou Xian froze. However, at this time, an invisible force shook out from the hall. In an instant, the space around Zhou Xian returned to normal. Not only that, the force released by Qin Tian also disappeared. Seeing this scene, Qin Tian's face became extremely solemn. There was another expert in this hall. In the distance, Zhou Xian suddenly looked at Qin Tian. Dean Qin, come and hit me. Everyone. Qin Tian looked at Zhou Xian and his right hand slowly clenched. Suddenly, a blue talisman of the lowest grade flew out from the hall. In the blink of an eye, this talisman arrived in front of Qin Tian. Qin Tian's face changed and he punched out with his right hand. Boom. Under the gazes of everyone, Qin Tian retreated explosively, and he retreated until he was outside the talisman sect. Everyone was petrified. By the time Qin Tian stopped, his whole arm had completely cracked. A blue talisman. Qin Tian looked in the direction of Fu Wenzong, and his expression was incomparably solemn. The opponent actually used a blue talisman to repel him. Who was it? In front of the ancestral hall, Xianxia's expression also became solemn. After a moment of silence, he walked towards the ancestral hall. The others wanted to go in, but they were blocked by a mysterious power. After Xianxia entered the hall, in addition to Zhou Xian, there was another middle-aged man. When he saw this middle-aged man, Xianxia was slightly stunned. In the next moment, he became excited and quickly bowed respectfully. Xinghe greets the patriarch. Fu Xiaotian glanced at Xianxia and smiled. Heavenly Talisman Master. Xianxia nodded hurriedly. Yes. Fu Xiaotian smiled and looked at Zhou Xian. He's my new disciple. He had just accepted a disciple. Hearing this, Xianxia's expression suddenly became a little strange. What should he be called when he was the disciple of his own ancestor? As Zhou Xian had said, he really had to call him Little Grandmaster. Xianxia looked at Fu Xiaotian. He hesitated for a moment and then said, Grandmaster, why is that? He still couldn't understand why Fu Xiaotian accepted Zhou Xian as his disciple. Fu Xiaotian smiled and said, Is there something you're worried about? Xianxia nodded. Zhou Xian has a fifth-dimensional treasure. He is the archenemy of the Worldwide Academy. Moreover, he has a lot of karma. If our Fu Wenzong is related to him, I'm afraid. At this point, he didn't continue speaking. Fu Xiaotian smiled and said, This is also an opportunity for Fu Wenzong, isn't it? Xianxia said in a deep voice, I know. However, I don't want Fu Wenzong to be involved in this dispute. Fu Xiaotian nodded. As the sect leader, you should naturally consider this. However, some things can't be avoided. Now I have accepted him as my disciple. Are you going to accept him or not? Of course, if you don't, it doesn't matter. I will let him leave Fu Wenzong. Xianxia smiled bitterly. Grandmaster, aren't you asking for my life? How can I, Fu Wenzong, Refused to accept Grandmaster's disciple. Green City Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestor Yi Xian has no talent and no virtue. From now on Yi Xian's position as the crown prince will be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a young man with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the elders of Yi clan. Why? At this time, a timid voice rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling, Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian, she rushed over despite her illness. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to everyone in the ancestral hall and said timidly, Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is the crown prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason? The Great Elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. This is a matter of the clan. What are you interrupting for? Leave. Yi Ling was obviously afraid, not daring to look at the Great Elder. However, she did not leave. Instead, she plucked up her courage and entered the ancestral hall. Once again she bowed to the elders. Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights at Nanshan. He's fighting for the clan and we don't know if he's dead or alive. Yet the clan is using groundless excuses to strip him of his position. This is unfair. Impudent. The Great Elder suddenly raged. Whether he's stripped or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this time the new crown prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. He should be flogged 30 times as a warning. The Great Elder replied coldly, then flog him 30 times. Very quickly 2 Yi clan guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years. Even now he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new crown prince Yi Lang. He knew that his chance to shine had come. The guard sneered, Young Master Yi Lang inherits the crown prince's position. What are you yelling about? As he spoke he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly turned red and swollen. However, she didn't cry. She just held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. What's your name? The guard hurriedly bowed. This subordinate Zhang Mu greets the crown prince. Yi Lang nodded. You're not bad. After I become the crown prince I'll need 10 personal guards. From now on you'll be my personal guard. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and hurriedly bowed deeply. This subordinate is willing to go through fire and water for the crown prince, even if it means death. Yi Lang nodded. Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Do not hold back. Understood? Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang and when he saw the killing intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this time Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something and he suddenly stopped. Within the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. He was wearing a tight-fitting robe that was tattered and covered in blood. This person was Yi Xian who had rushed back from the Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a cold smile. Inside the ancestral hall, all the elders frowned. The Great Elder's eyes narrowed and his face darkened. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He hurriedly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time Yi Xian was like a ferocious tiger, leaping in front of him. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Bang! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop and he rushed towards Zhang Mu again. At this time Yi Lang suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you! Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, your man? As he spoke he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, Prince, save me! Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced apart. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides there were the Yi clan elders. "Why?" At this time a timid voice rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a hint of fear in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian from his position, she had rushed over despite her illness. The old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall, and asked timidly, "Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason?" The Great Elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. "This is a matter of the clan, what are you butting in for? Leave." Yi Ling was obviously afraid and did not dare to look at the Great Elder. However, she did not leave. Instead, she plucked up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. Once again she bowed to the elders. "Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan for the rights to the mine. He is fighting for the clan and we don't know if he's dead or alive. Yet the clan is using a groundless excuse to strip him of his position. This is really unfair." "Impudent." The Great Elder suddenly raged. "Whether he's stripped or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this time the new prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. "He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others." The Great Elder replied coldly, "Then flog him 30 times. Very quickly 2 Yi clan guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years and even now he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yi Lang. He knew that his chance to shine had come. The guard sneered, "Young Master Yi Lang inherits the prince's position and it's everyone's wish. What are you yelling about?" As he spoke he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly turned red and swollen. However, she didn't cry and only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and said with a smile, "What's your name?" The guard quickly bowed. "This subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the prince I'll need 10 personal guards. From now on you'll be my personal guard." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and quickly bowed deeply. "This subordinate is willing to go through water and tread on fire for the prince, even if it means death." Yi Lang nodded. "Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Do not hold back. Understood?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang and when he saw the killing intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this time Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something and he suddenly stopped. Within the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. He was wearing a tight-fitting robe that was tattered and covered in blood. This person was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from the Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a cold smile. Within the ancestral hall, all the elders began to frown. The Great Elder's eyes narrowed and his face darkened. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Bang! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop and charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time Yi Lang suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Boo! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, your man? As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, Prince, save me. Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, tears welled up in her eyes. Brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Ping! Chapter 874. Fu Wenzong Talisman Hall. Many elders of Fu Wenzong had gathered in the hall. Even some talisman masters who had not shown up for a long time had appeared in the hall. Yi Xian was among them. Moreover, his position was a little special. He was next to Xianxia. On the right of Yi Xian were Fu Wenzong's Su Muqian and Lu Yong. These two could be considered as the second and third in command of Fu Wenzong. However, at this moment these two were behind Yi Xian. Lu Yong and Su Muqian were extremely puzzled. Why? Not only the two of them but all the experts of Fu Wenzong in the hall had the same question in their minds. Why did Xianxia protect Yi Xian and offend the entire worldwide academy? At this moment an elder suddenly said, Sect leader, the old man is a straightforward person. Speak your mind. As he said that, he glanced at Yi Xian. Sect leader, I feel that no matter what the reason is, I, Fu Wenzong, should not become enemies with the worldwide academy for one person. It's not worth it. A middle-aged man stood out as well. Presently, the Myriad Dimension Academy's actions are equivalent to a direct declaration of war against our talisman sect. Moreover, they've already started to act against our members, and some clans and sects that have attached themselves to us have been targeted by the Myriad Dimension Academy. If this continues, then it'll be extremely disadvantageous to our talisman sect. Very soon, one after another, Fu Wenzong experts stood out. Their meaning was simple. It was not worth becoming enemies with the worldwide academy for the sake of Yi Xian. It was not worth it at all. At this moment, another elder stood out. He looked at Yi Xian with an unfriendly expression. Sect leader, this person is not easy to deal with. It's really, shut up. At this moment, Xianxia, who had been silent, suddenly said. The old man immediately stopped. The hall quietened down in an instant. Xianxia glanced at the crowd. Is it time for me to speak? As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian and said with a smile, Little Grandmaster, why don't you say it? Little Grandmaster. Hearing this, everyone in the hall was shocked and looked at Yi Xian. Lu Yong and Su Muqian also looked at Yi Xian with shock in their eyes. Little Grandmaster? Lu Yong looked at Xianxia. Sect Master, this. Xianxia said softly. Everyone should know that something special happened in the ancestral shrine. Before that, the patriarch appeared. The patriarch had appeared. All the spectators were shocked when they heard this. Fu Xiaotiang. In the hearts of Fu Wenzong and the others, this person was like a god. Because there wouldn't be a Fu Wenzong without him. Meanwhile, Xianxia said, the patriarch has taken him as his personal disciple. The little grandmaster possesses the patriarch's inheritance now, and he's the hope of our Fu Wenzong. Because only he has the highest chance of drawing a 7-colored talisman. A 7-colored talisman. All the spectators gazed at Yi Xian with complicated expressions. Meanwhile, Lu Yong suddenly said, Sect Master, did the patriarch say anything else? Xianxia spoke softly. He asked us to properly assist the little grandmaster. Of course he said that as well. If we feel that the little grandmaster will implicate our Fu Wenzong, then we can ask him to leave. He won't say anything about it. What a joke. Meanwhile, Su Muqian spoke abruptly. Since he obtained the patriarch's inheritance, then he belongs to us, Fu Wenzong. That's because he's a member of my rune sect. How can we let him leave? Lu Yong nodded lightly. The patriarch definitely has his reasons for doing this. As he spoke, he gazed at Yi Xian. However, the little grandmaster really is in a bad situation right now. The important matter at hand is to resolve the danger he's in. An old man spoke solemnly. The worldwide academy is going too far. They clearly know that the little grandmaster belongs to me, Fu Wenzong, yet they still intend to kill him. They're not taking me, Fu Wenzong, seriously at all. Since they want to fight, then let's fight. Do you think that I, Fu Wenzong, would fear the Worldwide Academy? A middle-aged man spoke as well. Since the Worldwide Academy has declared war on us, then we'll fight them. Sect Master, I suggest that we immediately recall all the disciples of Fu Wenzong. Besides that, we old fellows shouldn't just stand by and do nothing. Start drawing talismans. The more the better. Besides that, it's time for those powers that owe us a favor to be repaid. Lu Yong suddenly spoke softly. Now is the time to decide who our true friends are and who are fake. As he spoke, he gazed at Xianxia and said, it's a critical moment right now and we can't lose in terms of momentum. Because once we lose, then many powers that are hesitating will turn against the Worldwide Academy. So I suggest that we take the initiative to attack. Since we're already enemies, then we should take the initiative to gain the upper hand. When they heard this, everyone gazed at Lu Yong. Lu Yong continued, directly dispatch forces to kill the students of the Worldwide Academy. Meanwhile, Su Muqian hesitated for a moment before he said, if we do that, then there'll really be no room for negotiation. Lu Yong shook his head. The little grandmaster is an extraordinary genius, and he's even obtained the founding ancestors' inheritance now. Under such circumstances, do you think Qin Tian would dare to allow him to live? Su Muqian fell silent. Just as Lu Yong had said, Zhou Xian was an extraordinary genius himself. His strength was so high at such a young age and it was extremely rare even in the fifth dimension. Now Zhou Xian had obtained the inheritance of the founding ancestor Fu Wenzong. If he were to continue growing like this, then who wouldn't be afraid? So the Worldwide Academy would absolutely not allow Zhou Xian to grow. Meanwhile, Lu Yong said, the Worldwide Academy won't let the little grandmaster off, so they'll definitely attack. Since they'll definitely attack, then why don't we make the first move? There are two benefits to making the first move. Firstly, we'll be able to take the Worldwide Academy by surprise. Secondly, we'll be able to let the world know that our Fu Wenzong isn't afraid of the Worldwide Academy. Only in this way would those indecisive powers lean towards us. Xianxia nodded. All right. Lu Yong continued, there's one more thing. Compared to the Worldwide Academy, our overall strength is a bit weaker. Of course, the difference isn't huge. However, if the Worldwide Academy doesn't have the help of other powers, they won't dare to fight to the death with our Fu Wenzong. Because if they fight to the death, even if our Fu Wenzong is destroyed, their Worldwide Academy will be crippled. So if I'm not wrong, the Worldwide Academy will definitely rope in other powers. And we too need to rope in other powers. Moreover, we need to rope in those superpowers. Speaking up to this point, he paused before continuing, from now on we need to draw more talismans. It's best if we draw some orange talismans. Also, rope in those aristocratic families and some big powers. Leave this matter to me. Xianxia nodded. I naturally don't have to worry about leaving it to you. As he spoke, he gazed at Zhou Xian. Young martial ancestor, don't leave Fu Wenzong during this period of time. Stay in the sect and study the talisman Dao well. If you're able to draw 7 colored talismans, then you'll be able to change my fate completely. Zhou Xian glanced at them and said, everyone, even though I've obtained master's inheritance and I can be considered to be a member of Fu Wenzong, I have to remind all of you that I might not be a person who knows my place. Simply put, trouble follows me wherever I go. Moreover, each enemy is stronger than the last. If I stay in Fu Wenzong, then I'm afraid I'll drag Fu Wenzong down with me in the future. So if all of you don't mind, then I can leave Fu Wenzong and absolutely won't drag Fu Wenzong down with me. If it was in the past, he would definitely want Fu Wenzong to fight to the death with the Worldwide Academy. But it was different now. He'd obtained Fu Xiaotian's inheritance, so if he still schemed against Fu Wenzong, then he would truly be worse than a pig or a dog. So he wasn't willing to drag Fu Wenzong down with him. Meanwhile, Lu Yong spoke abruptly, young martial ancestor, this isn't a question of whether you'll be a burden or not. You've obtained the ancestors' inheritance, so you're a member of Fu Wenzong. If we abandon you because of fear of the Worldwide Academy, then wouldn't that disappoint countless disciples of Fu Wenzong? Moreover, how would we be able to face the ancestors' spirit in heaven? Your problem is Fu Wenzong's problem. As for the Worldwide Academy, you don't need to think too much about it. Even though our Fu Wenzong isn't as strong as the Worldwide Academy, Fu Wenzong isn't weak either. If the Worldwide Academy wants to bully us, then it won't be that easy. Su Muqian nodded. Young martial ancestor, you've just arrived in the 5th dimension, so you might not be very clear about my strength. Fu Wenzong have inherited it for so many years. Even though I'm not a top power in the 5th dimension, there aren't any powers that dare to bully us at will. Yi Xingguan thought about it and said, Everyone, I still have some friends in the 4th dimension. They're extremely strong, so I want them to come here. Xianxia said with a smile, Is it Xiaoqi and Lanxiu and the others? Yi Xingguan looked at Xianxia and the latter said with a smile, We've investigated you before, young martial ancestor. Therefore we know a little about you and your friends, Dao Yi. Those few people are all extraordinary figures. Yi Xinghe nodded. Can they come to Fu Wenzong? Xianxia said, Of course they can. However, as far as I know, they're currently guarding the 4th dimension for you. They come. Speaking up to here, he paused and said, How about this? I'll send some people to the 4th dimension and let them guard it for you. Even though I can't guarantee that they'll be able to guard the 4th dimension well, at least they can make some people feel apprehensive. Yi Xingguan said in a deep voice, Many thanks. Xianxia said with a smile, It's a piece of cake. Saying this, he looked at Su Muqian. Pick a few people and let them bring 2 orange talismans to the 4th dimension. If they meet someone they know, ask them to give me, Fu Wenzong, some face and not target the 4th dimension. If they meet someone they're not familiar with, say hello. If they don't leave, kill them directly. Su Muqian nodded. I'll handle this matter. Saying this, he turned around and left. Xianxia looked at Yi Xinghe and said, Remember, don't go out during this period of time. Yi Xinghe nodded. I'll study the Rune Dao during this period of time. Xianxia smiled and said, You've obtained martial ancestors' inheritance, so you must properly absorb it. During this period of time, I'll personally guide you. As for the matters outside, we'll handle it. Lu Yong, who was at the side, also said, Previously you were alone. But now you're Fu Wenzong's little martial ancestor. Don't worry, no matter what happens, Fu Wenzong, will advance and retreat together with you. Actually, everyone was very satisfied with Yi Xingguan. Not only because Yi Xingguan had obtained martial ancestor Fu Wenzong's inheritance, but also because Yi Xingguan himself was truly monstrous. Fu Wenzong did not lack people with monstrous talent in Rune Dao, but he lacked people with extremely strong combat strength. Yi Xingguan's combat strength could only be described as terrifying. In addition, he had obtained martial ancestor Fu Wenzong's inheritance. Therefore, it was completely worth it to start a war with the Worldwide Academy for Yi Xingguan. Chapter 875. Yi Xian hadn't expected Fu Wenzong to be so protective of him. After all, protecting him would mean breaking off relations with the Myriad Dimension Academy. At this moment, he could sense that these people truly wanted to protect him. Unity. Fu Wenzong was truly united. However, this was normal. Sects like this wouldn't have survived until now if they weren't united. Factions and families could have internal conflicts, but they had to be united in the face of danger. If they weren't united, only death would await them. In the remaining time, Yi Xian began to focus on the rune path. As he delved deeper into Rune Dao, he became more and more interested in Rune Dao. Rune Dao was broad and profound, and it involved many aspects. For example, if one wanted to draw a spatial talisman, one would need to have a sufficient understanding of space. If one wanted to draw a fire-based gourd, one would need to have a sufficient understanding of fire. What he drew was spatial talismans because he had the Space Dao Law. With the Space Dao Law, he could draw spatial talismans with half the effort, especially with Xianxia's personal guidance. Therefore, he could now draw purple talismans with ease. When he saw that Yi Xian could draw purple talismans so quickly, Xianxia was extremely excited. A genius. As far as he was concerned, Yi Xian was a genius. Fu Wenzong had picked up a treasure. As for Yi Xian, he was even more interested in the Rune Dao. Rune Dao was also a type of great path. Inside the rune hall, Xianxia stood at the entrance with Lu Yong standing beside him. Xianxia asked softly, "What's the situation like now?" Lu Yong replied, "The Qing nation, the Heavenly Sound Palace, the Qian family, and some small sects and families have expressed their support, but not many. The weapon refining sect, the alchemy sect, the martial sect, and the Boundless Island have yet to express their support." As he spoke, he paused for a moment before he continued. They won't easily make their stand known. Or perhaps they'll choose to watch from the sidelines. Xianxia nodded. Did the female teacher from the Worldwide Academy return? A female teacher. Lu Yong's expression instantly became solemn when he heard this. Although Qin Tian was now the master of the Worldwide Academy, this female teacher was the most terrifying person in the Worldwide Academy. Not only was she powerful, but she was also influential. Among the Prophet's many students, this female teacher could be said to be very, very dazzling. This was because in the past her knowledge was second only to the Prophet. As for her strength, no one knew how strong she was. They only knew that she was very knowledgeable and amiable. She had helped countless people and made countless good karma. Even Fu Wenzong was indebted to him. If she wanted to fight, the academy head of the Worldwide Academy would never be Qin Tian. If she became the prefecture master, the current fifth dimension would definitely be much better. Unfortunately, after the Prophet disappeared, she also disappeared. Many people said that she went to find the Prophet. This time if she returned, it would be very disadvantageous to Fu Wenzong. Because once she opened her mouth, many powers and super experts in the fifth dimension would give her face. Lu Yong said, "There's no news of her for the time being." Xianxia nodded. "That's good. With her, Fu Wenzong really have no chance of winning." Lu Yong nodded. "Yes." Xianxia said, "His progress is godly. He can now draw high-grade purple talismans. Moreover, it's close to perfection." Close to perfection. Hearing this, Lu Yong was somewhat shocked. Close to perfection? Xinqingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as prince will be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man wearing a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the Yi clan's elders. "Why?" At this time, a somewhat timid voice suddenly echoed in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling. She was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling slightly bowed to the people in the ancestral hall. She timidly said, "Great elder, my brother Yi Xian is a prince. Why did you discard him for no reason?" The great elder coldly looked at Yi Ling. "This is a family matter. Why are you interrupting? Leave." Yi Ling was obviously afraid. She did not dare to look at the great elder. However, she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and entered the ancestral hall. She once again bowed to the elders on both sides. "Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights. He is fighting for the clan with his life on the line. His fate is unknown. Yet the clan is using a groundless excuse to discard his position. This is unfair." Impudent. The great elder suddenly raged. "Whether he discards his position or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this time the new prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. "He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others." The great elder coldly replied, "Then flog him 30 times. Very quickly 2 Yi clan's guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists. She angrily said, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years. Even now he is fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered. "Young master Yi Lang inherits the prince's position. What are you yelling about?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded. Yi Ling's right cheek instantly turned red and swollen. However, she did not cry. She only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed. "This subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the prince, I will need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed. He hurriedly bowed deeply. "This subordinate will go through fire and water for the prince." I will do anything for you. Yilang nodded. Drag him away. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't hold back. Do you understand? Zhang Mu glanced at Yilang. When he saw the murderous intent in Yilang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yiling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu suddenly stopped as if he had seen something. Inside the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe. The robe was tattered and covered in blood. The young man was Zhou Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Zhou Xian, Yilang's mouth curled into a cold smile. Inside the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes. His face was dark and gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Zhou Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yiling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Zhou Xian, his face changed. He hurriedly looked at Yilang and was about to speak. At this moment, Zhou Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Zhou Xian's fist landed on his face. Bang! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. Yilang did not stop there. He charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yilang suddenly roared, Zhou Xian, he's my man. How dare you? Zhou Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yilang's face turned ugly. Zhou Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, your man? As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, Prince, save me. Zhou Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yiling's side. Seeing Yiling's state, Zhou Xian felt as though his heart was being cut by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yiling saw Zhou Xian, her tears flowed. Brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Zhou Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Zhou Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Zhou Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yilang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yilang. On both sides there were the elders of the Yi clan. Why? Right at this moment, a slightly timid voice suddenly resounded within the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a hint of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yiling and she was Zhou Xian's younger sister. When she heard that Zhou Xian was to be replaced, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. Yiling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yiling bowed to everyone in the hall as she asked timidly, Great Elder, my brother Zhou Xian is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason? The Great Elder looked at Yiling coldly. This is a matter of the clan, what are you interrupting for? Leave. Yiling was obviously afraid, not daring to look at the Great Elder, but she did not leave. Instead, she plucked up her courage and walked into the hall. Once again she bowed to the elders. Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights at Nanshan. He is fighting for the clan and it is unknown whether he is dead or alive. Yet the clan is using a groundless excuse to strip him of his position. This is really unfair. Impudent. The Great Elder suddenly raged. Whether or not he is crippled, it is not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this time the new prince Yilang suddenly laughed. You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The Great Elder replied coldly, then flog him 30 times. Very quickly 2 Yi clan guards rushed in. Yiling clenched her fists and said angrily, This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years and even now he is fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yilang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, Young Master Yilang inherits the position of prince. What are you yelling about? As he spoke he raised his hand and slapped Yiling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded and the right side of Yiling's face instantly swelled up. However, she did not cry and only held her cheek tightly. Yilang looked at the guard and smiled. What's your name? The guard hurriedly bowed. This subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince. Yilang nodded. You are very good. After I become the prince I will need 10 guards. From now on you will be my guard. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and hurriedly bowed deeply. This subordinate is willing to go through fire and water for the prince, even if it means death. Yilang nodded slightly. Drag him away. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Do not show mercy, understand? Zhang Mu glanced at Yilang, and when he saw the murderous intent in Yilang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yiling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu did not know what he saw, but he suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe, and the robe was tattered and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Zhou Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Zhou Xian, Yilang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes, and his expression was frighteningly gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Zhou Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yiling, his expression turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Zhou Xian, his expression changed. He quickly looked at Yilang and was about to speak, when Zhou Xian suddenly leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Zhou Xian's fist landed on his face. Zhang Mu's head spun and he stumbled and fell. Yilang did not stop there and he rushed towards Zhang Mu again. At this time Yilang suddenly roared, Zhou Xian, he's my man, how dare you? Zhou Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yilang's expression turned ugly, while Zhou Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, your man? As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, Prince, save me. Zhou Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yiling's side. Seeing Yiling's appearance, Zhou Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced apart. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yiling saw Zhou Xian, tears welled up in her eyes. Brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Zhou Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Ping! Chapter 876. Kill. As soon as Yiling finished speaking, the two old men behind her disappeared. Two blood-red lights flashed past the white-robed old man's throat. His head flew off his neck without any chance to fight back. His soul was destroyed. On the ground, the white-robed old man's head rolled down. His eyes were wide open and filled with disbelief. The black-robed old man knelt on the ground and lowered his head. In fact, he did not know why his master would do this, but he did not dare to ask. When Yiling walked to the door, she suddenly stopped. Pass down my order. If anyone from the Worldwide Academy dares to step into this place, kill. As she said this, she seemed to have thought of something and added, except for that woman. After saying this, she walked through the door. On the ground, the black-robed old man bowed respectfully. He knew who the woman his master was talking about was. Female teacher. She could be said to be the most respected person in the four-dimensional universe. As if thinking of something, the black-robed old man suddenly looked at the two old men not far away. Two respected elders, master seems to have feelings for that Zhou Xian. One of the old men said softly, don't touch that person. Also, pay attention to that person's movements at all times. If necessary, help him. The black-robed old man hesitated and asked, Left respected elder, why? The left respected elder said, there is no why. Just do as I say. Wuxia, remember not to offend that person. After saying this, the two of them turned around and disappeared. Zhou Xian. The black-robed old man called Wuxia thought for a moment before turning around and leaving. Worldwide Academy inside the library. Qin Tian suddenly put down an ancient book in his hand. He looked in front of him and saw a strange black shadow standing in front of him. Qin Tian asked, dead? The black shadow nodded. Yes. Also, the Empress said that no one from the Worldwide Academy is allowed to step into the Azura Hell. Hearing this, Qin Tian frowned slightly. Why? The black shadow shook his head. I don't know. Qin Tian was silent. After a moment, Qin Tian suddenly said, "Is there any news of her?" The Black Shadow Man shook his head. "No." Qin Tian got up and walked to the door of the book hall. He looked into the distance and asked softly, "Agai, what do you think?" Agai said in a low voice, "Mannerhead, we really shouldn't target the Zhou Xian now." Qin Tian smiled and said, "Are you trying to say that the pagoda is no longer in his hands? Moreover, he has obtained Patriarch Fu Wenzong's inheritance, so Fu Wenzong will protect him with his life, so we shouldn't go against him?" Agai nodded. "There's no point in targeting him now. If the Mannerhead is worried about him growing up, in my opinion, there's really no need for that. Once he grows up, that's a matter for the future. Moreover, as long as we're strong enough, why would we need to fear him?" Qin Tian shook his head. "I'm not targeting him." Agai said, "Please enlighten me, Chief." Qin Tian suddenly asked, "Agai, what do you think of our Worldwide Academy's position in the five-dimensional universe? Tell me the truth." After a moment of silence, Agai said, "It's far from what it used to be. The current Worldwide Academy could be said to be worlds apart from when the Prophet was still around." Qin Tian chuckled and said, "Today our Worldwide Academy is getting worse day by day. If this continues, at most in 100 years, at that time, if our Worldwide Academy doesn't produce a super evildoer, our Worldwide Academy will completely disappear from the five-dimensional universe. This isn't an alarmist talk because our Worldwide Academy has something that everyone in the five-dimensional universe wants. Worldwide Bookstore. This bookstore was left behind by the Prophet. In the five-dimensional universe, no one could resist the temptation of this bookstore. And now these forces were still a little afraid of the Worldwide Academy, so they didn't dare to force their way in. After all, the Prophet's prestige was still there, and that female teacher was still alive. However, if this continued, the Worldwide Academy would only become weaker and weaker. Unless, as Qin Tian said, a super genius appeared in the Worldwide Academy, the kind of super evildoer that could change the structure of the five-dimensional universe. However, the Worldwide Academy couldn't pin its hopes on this kind of illusory thing. At this time, Qin Tian said, "The reason why we want to kill Zhou Xian is because that Xiao Ta has already recognized him as his master." Hearing this, Agai's expression changed. "Recognized him as his master?" Qin Tian nodded. If he didn't recognize him as his master, then Xiao Ta definitely wouldn't cooperate with him. To put it simply, the biggest threat to us in the five-dimensional universe is this Zhou Xian. Agai was silent. If this Xiao Ta had already recognized Zhou Xian as his master, then just like what Qin Tian said, this Zhou Xian was really the biggest threat to the Worldwide Academy. This meant that Zhou Xian had a high chance of obtaining the Worldwide Bookstore. As for others, even if they obtained the World Prison Pagoda, they might not be able to open the Worldwide Bookstore. This was because in order to open the Worldwide Bookstore, the World Prison Pagoda must cooperate. Qin Tian continued, "Moreover, right now, everyone is looking at our Worldwide Academy. They want to see how much strength our Worldwide Academy has. And this time, if we don't shock them, those forces will start to target us." Speaking up to here, he paused and then said, "Actually, I made a wrong move from the beginning. But now I can only make mistakes step by step. There is no turning back." Agai said softly, "Palace Master is gambling with the Academy." Qin Tian smiled and said, "Right now if we don't gamble we can only die a slow death." Saying this, he shook his head and smiled. "Everyone says that I, Qin Tian, usurped her position as Palace Master. What's funny is that I strongly recommended her to be Palace Master, but she still let go and left. This time she left for so many years." Agai was silent. He was still relatively clear about what happened in the past. That year, Qin Tian did not have the intention to fight for the position of Palace Master. This was because the female teacher was too dazzling. As long as she wanted it, the position of Palace Master would definitely belong to her. Unfortunately, that female teacher did not have the slightest intention of becoming the Palace Master. Agai sighed softly, "I wonder where she is now. If that female teacher was here, the position of the Worldwide Academy in the fifth dimension would be greatly different." Unfortunately, after she left the Worldwide Academy, she never came back. At this time, Qin Tian suddenly said, "Let her be. Our current top priority is to get rid of this Zhou Xian. This person can make the pagoda recognize him as its master. We must get rid of him." Agai said, "What about the woman in the fourth dimension? The woman in the plain dress?" Hearing this, Qin Tian's expression suddenly became solemn. After a moment, Qin Tian shook his head. Don't provoke this person for now. I will personally go down and meet this person another day. A guy nodded. Now there are already many forces standing on Fu Wenzong's side. Fu Wenzong has already laid his hands on our people. Some of the disciples outside have already been killed by Fu Wenzong. Qin Tian said calmly, ask all the martial masters in Wien to come back. Also, pass down the order that the students who are studying outside must immediately return to the academy. Those who do not return within 3 days will be treated as traitors of the academy. Saying this, he paused and said, ask the people from the martial arts pavilion to get ready. Martial arts pavilion. Hearing this, A Gai's expression became solemn. She knew that once the people from the martial arts pavilion were sent out, it would mean that it was a real battle of life and death. However, now everyone was watching the Worldwide Academy. If the Worldwide Academy did not do anything, then the prestige of the Worldwide Academy in the 5th dimension would plummet. Fu Wenzong. In the first hall, Xian had already started to draw an orange talisman, which was also a space-type orange talisman. He did not draw other types of talismans for now because he was more proficient in space-type talismans. Therefore, he wanted to familiarize himself with space-type talismans first. It had to be said that the orange talisman was much more difficult than the purple talisman. Especially one point, which was that it could not be carved. It had to be done in one stroke. It could be said that there was no room for mistakes. During this period, Xianxia had been giving pointers at the side. After a long time, Xianxia quietly left the hall. Lu Yong was waiting in front of the hall. When he saw Xianxia come out, he quickly asked, how was it? Xianxia was silent. Lu Yong frowned slightly. What? Did it not go well? Xianxia shook his head. It is not that it did not go well, but it went too well. His understanding of space-type talismans is so deep that it is a little abnormal. In addition, the talismans he drew are different from ours. Lu Yong was puzzled. What do you mean? Xianxia opened his palm and in his hand was an orange talisman. Look. Lu Yong said in a low voice. This was drawn by him? Xianxia nodded. Take a closer look. Lu Yong looked at the orange talisman and very quickly his face changed. There is a qi in this talisman and it is different from ours. This is? Xianxia said in a low voice. Chaos qi. Hearing this, Lu Yong's face changed abruptly. How can he have this kind of chaos qi? Xianxia shook his head. I don't know. As he said this, he looked into the hall and said softly, he is too mysterious. Lu Yong said in a low voice. No matter what, he is now one of my people, Fu Wenzong. To me, this is a good thing. Xianxia nodded. How is the Worldwide Academy? Lu Yong said, there might be some big movements soon. It seems that Qin Tian will not let this matter rest. Xianxia said indifferently, if he wants to play, then we will play with him to the end. As he said this, he looked at Lu Yong. How many orange talismans do we have now? Lu Yong said, more than 200. Xianxia nodded. Take out half and invite people from Nifa's city. Invite as many as you can. Lu Yong hesitated for a moment and then he said, those fellows aren't easy to deal with. Xianxia nodded. They only care about money, not people. That's exactly what we need right now. Besides that, send some people to receive Shaoqi and the others. They are all extraordinary geniuses. If they come to Fu Wenzong, then it will be extremely beneficial to Fu Wenzong. Lu Yong nodded slightly. I've already sent some people to receive them. There shouldn't be any mishaps. Xianxia said in a low voice. Just in case, you should make a trip there yourself. Lu Yong nodded slightly. All right. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Xianxia remained silent for a moment, and then he turned around and returned to the hall. He was stunned when he saw Xian. There was a perfect orange talisman in front of Xian. Chapter 877. A perfect orange talisman. Undeniably, Xianxia was extremely shocked at this moment. Although it was difficult to draw a perfect purple talisman, there were quite a few people in Fu Wenzong who could draw such a perfect purple talisman. On the other hand, apart from him, there was only one other elder in Fu Wenzong who could draw a perfect orange talisman. How old were he and that elder? How old was Xian? A perfect orange talisman. At this moment Xianxia finally understood why Fu Xiaotian had accepted Yi Xian as his disciple. Yi Xian was really a genius in talisman Dao, a super genius. At this moment he truly believed that Yi Xian could draw a 7-colored talisman. Beside him Yi Xian slumped on the chair. He had to admit that drawing an orange talisman was really too tiring. For a full 6 hours he did not even dare to blink his eyes. This was the first time he had been so focused on one thing. He had no choice but to focus, because the slightest mistake would greatly reduce the quality of the orange talisman. However, it was really tiring. At this time Xianxia suddenly smiled and asked, "How do you feel?" Yi Xian shook his head and smiled, "Very tiring." Xianxia laughed heartily, "It's still okay for you. If it was someone else they would need at least a month to draw an orange talisman. If it was a perfect orange talisman they would need at least 3 months. Yi Xian was puzzled. Why? Xianxia smiled, "Because of your stamina. Drawing talisman consumes a lot of stamina and mental strength. Moreover, your physical body and divine soul are extremely strong, so you can focus on drawing for such a long time. Can be said that in this aspect you have a unique advantage." Yi Xian smiled, "If I keep drawing talisman I will not be able to bear it." Xianxia smiled faintly, "It's already very good. You can be considered as a heavenly talisman master now." Yi Xian looked at Xianxia. "Heaven talisman master?" Xianxia smiled and said, "Yes. In the Tao of talismans, there were elementary talisman master, advanced talisman master, master Fu Wenzong, earth talisman master and heaven talisman master. Above them was the divine talisman master, the divine talisman master. As for our 5-dimensional universe, only the prophet and patriarch were considered divine talisman masters." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "So, I'm only 1 step away from becoming a divine talisman master, right?" Xianxia nodded. "You can say that." Yi Xian nodded. "Understood." Xianxia smiled. "Do you want to give it a try?" Yi Xian shook his head. "I've already tried. No way." The reason why it was so difficult to draw a 7-colored talisman was because it required the addition of 7 different types of energy. Metal, wood, water, fire, earth, lightning, as well as chaotic energy. These 7 types of energy could be obtained anywhere, but the difficult part was to fuse them together. He had tried it just now, but it was still very difficult. This was because he was currently proficient in the power of space and the power of earth. He was not familiar with the other types of energy at all. Therefore he was completely unable to draw a 7-colored talisman. At the side Xianxia smiled. "This 7-colored talisman cannot be rushed. You are already good enough for now. Take it slow, step by step." Yi Xian nodded and looked at Xianxia. "Old Xian, I want to ask you about something." Xianxia said, "What is it?" Yi Xian said, "Old Xian, do you know about the Azura Hell?" Xianxia nodded. "Of course I do. There is a great empress living there. Moreover, she is a peerless great empress. She is one of the 6 super experts of the 5-dimensional universe." Yi Xian was somewhat curious. 6 super experts? This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. Xianxia nodded. "These 6 people are the female teacher of the Worldwide Academy, the Azura Empress of the Azura Hell, the broken daughter of the Master of the Myriad Dimensions, Jianshui of the Blue Dome of the Heavens, the old undying of the Banished Immortal City." At this point he paused before continuing. "The old undying of the Banished Immortal City is also known as Li Mubai. This person's blade technique is peerless. He has lived his entire life in the Banished Immortal City. He only left the city once when he challenged the prophet." "Challenged the prophet?" Yi Xian hurriedly asked. "What was the result?" Xianxia said solemnly, "Back then this person carried an ancient saber on his back and headed to the Myriad Dimensional Academy. He didn't enter the Myriad Dimensional Academy. Instead he slashed out 3 times outside the Myriad Dimensional Academy. After slashing out 3 times he sat in front of the city gate for a month." Yi Xian asked again, "Did he win or lose?" Xianxia shook his head. "I don't know. However, after he returned he became even more powerful. And now, this banished immortal's strength is probably beyond our understanding." After a moment of silence Yi Xian asked again, "What about the other one?" Xianxia smiled. "The Tomb Guardian of the Void Dimension." "The Void Dimension?" Yi Xian said in a low voice, "I've heard of this place. It's said that it's very dangerous? Xianxia nodded. There are 3 forbidden areas in the 5th dimension. The boundless ghost city, the land of eternal life, and the void dimension. Yi Xian asked, Elder Shen, what kind of place is the land of eternal life? Xianxia said, I don't know what kind of place the land of eternal life is. No one knows either. All I know is that there is the number 1 sword in the 5th dimension, the sword of eternal life. Rumor has it that there is the power of eternal life. If you enter the land of eternal life and obtain this sword, you will obtain the power of eternal life. However, no one knows if it's true or not. Yi Xian was puzzled. Has no one ever entered it? Xianxia said, naturally some people have been there. However, those who entered are basically dead. There are only 2 who didn't die. One is the Shura Empress and the other is the Prophet. The sword of eternal life. Yi Xian said in a low voice, Miss Xianxia, did you enter the land of eternal life with the Prophet? The reason why he asked about this place was that he had promised the Devil Lord to see if he could resurrect the woman in the coffin. Xianxia said, Master went there, I didn't. However, Master took Big Sister there. So, Big Sister should be more clear about the situation there. Speaking of this, she paused and said, however, I did go to the boundless ghost city and the void dimension with Master. Yi Xian asked quickly, how was it? Xianxia said calmly, I know you are curious about everything. However, I have to warn you, don't even think about these 3 places. Even the 6 super experts that the old man mentioned just now don't dare to step into these 3 places easily. Yi Xian said in a low voice, it's that dangerous? Xianxia said, it's very dangerous. Of course, if you can let the woman in the plain dress take you there, then it won't be a problem. Yi Xian smiled. It seemed that Miss Xianxia approved of the woman in the plain dress. At this time, Xianxia said, I think that as long as that woman doesn't want to die, there should be no force in this world that can kill her. The woman in the plain dress. He had to admit that he missed the woman in the plain dress a little. Yi Xian collected his thoughts and looked at Xianxia and said, Old Shen, I mainly want to ask about the Shura Empress. Where is the land of Azura? Xianxia frowned slightly. You want to go to the land of Azura? Yi Xian nodded. Come to the 5th dimension. This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. After leaving the universe, he'd always been concerned about one thing, and that was Yi Ling. Xianxia said in a low voice, you can't go there. Yi Xian was puzzled. Why? Xianxia's expression became solemn. That place is very dangerous. Moreover, the Worldwide Academy is constantly watching you. It's too dangerous for you to go there. Yi Xian fell silent. Xianxia asked again, why do you want to go to the land of Azura? Yi Xian said, I want to go and have a look. Xianxia glanced at Yi Xian. I don't care what your reason is, but you really can't go there. This place doesn't welcome outsiders, especially the Shura Empress. She's cruel and merciless, and she kills at the slightest disagreement. She doesn't care who you are. In her eyes, there are only the living and the dead. Yi Xian hesitated for a while and said, actually, she's quite kind. Xianxia was dumbfounded. The Shura Empress is kind? Xianxia's expression became strange. Could it be that the little Grandmaster's brain had gone haywire when he was drawing runes? At this moment Yi Xian said, Old Shen, don't worry. I won't go there for now. He knew that Yi Ling was the Shura Empress, and the current Yi Ling was definitely very powerful. If he went to look for Yi Ling now, he wouldn't be able to do anything. However, he firmly believed that Yi Ling was still the same Yi Ling. She hadn't changed. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Xianxia was relieved. Yes. Although your strength isn't bad, there are still many places that are very dangerous for you. The most important thing for you now is to study the Tao of Runes. At this moment, Su Muqian suddenly appeared in the hall. Xianxia looked at Su Muqian. What's wrong? Su Muqian said in a deep voice, something happened. Xianxia frowned slightly. Speak. Su Muqian said, Elder Lu Yong went to pick up little Grandmaster's friends. They were surrounded by the Worldwide Academy. This time, the Worldwide Academy directly sent out the Martial Arts Pavilion's men. The leader is the Martial Arts Hall Master Wu Lin. Yi Xian suddenly stood up. At this moment, Xianxia shook his head. Little Grandmaster, please wait. Yi Xian looked at Xianxia. Xianxia said in a deep voice, if they are from the Martial Arts Pavilion, it means that they are completely capable of killing Elder Lu and the others. They surrounded Elder Lu Yong and the others because they obviously want us to rescue them. In other words, they want you to rescue them. Their real target is you. Yi Xian asked, is the martial arts pavilion very powerful? Xianxia said in a deep voice, very powerful. It is a hall created by the prophet of the Myriad Dimensions Academy. The people inside are the most monstrous prodigies in Wuyan. These people are extremely powerful. Yi Xian said, they are in danger. He knew that Xiaoqi and the others were very powerful, but he also knew that the worldwide academy wasn't as simple as it seemed. Without thinking much, Yi Xian was about to leave. At this moment, Xianxia suddenly said, don't go. I will go personally. And Yi Xian had already disappeared. Seeing this, Xianxia's expression changed. He quickly said, gather all the experts in the sect. Protect him at all costs. Su Muqian immediately turned and left. Xianxia also left quickly. After Yi Xian left Fu Wenzong, he immediately contacted Xiaoqi. Thus, he rode on his sword and disappeared into the horizon. Approximately 1 hour later, Yi Xian suddenly stopped. In front of him stood a middle-aged man. Qin Tian looked at Yi Xian and smiled. I have been waiting for you for a long time. P.S. I have been waiting for your tickets for a long time. End of this chapter. Chapter 878. Just as Xianxia has said, the Worldwide Academy's target this time was Yi Xian. If Yi Xian stayed with Fu Wenzong, the Worldwide Academy couldn't do anything to him. After all, the Worldwide Academy couldn't go all out to attack Fu Wenzong because the price would be too high. Lure Yi Xian out. This was the lowest price. Yi Xian looked at Qin Tian with a calm expression. Qin Tian chuckled, you are very calm. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. There is one thing I don't understand. Xiao Ta is no longer with me. Why do you insist on biting me? Qin Tian looked at Yi Xian. Because it has recognized you as its master. Yi Xian asked, because of this? Qin Tian nodded, because of this. Yi Xian looked around and said with a smile, are you alone? Qin Tian smiled, is it not enough? Yi Xian nodded, I'm afraid it's not enough. Qin Tian looked at Yi Xian, why don't you try? Just as he said that, he opened his palm and was about to make a move. Yi Xian suddenly opened his right hand and an ancient book appeared in his hand. Book realm. Seeing this book, Qin Tian's expression changed. The next moment both of them entered the book realm. After entering the book realm, Qin Tian's realm was suppressed from heaven's secret realm to life and death realm. An entire realm was suppressed. Qin Tian's expression turned ugly. This book realm was his treasure. Now Yi Xian was using his treasure to deal with him. Far away, Yi Xian opened his palm and the executing heaven sword appeared in his hand. He walked towards Qin Tian and smiled, come, let's exchange 2 moves. As soon as he finished speaking, he transformed into a ray of sword light and vanished on the spot. On the other side, Qin Tian's expression was calm. When the sword light was about to hit him, he suddenly punched out. He did not rely on the power of the talisman, but purely his own strength. This punch, boom. Yi Xian's sword light was forced to a halt, unable to advance any further. Qin Tian looked at Yi Xian with a sneer. Do you think that by suppressing me by 1 realm you can... At that moment, a red glow suddenly appeared on the tip of the executing heaven sword in Yi Xian's hand. The next moment, boom. Qin Tian was instantly sent flying. By the time Qin Tian stopped, his right fist had already split open and blood was flowing out. Qin Tian looked at Yi Xian from afar. His face was incomparably gloomy. Word spirit. Just now, Yi Xian had directly used the word spirit of the annihilation word. At this moment, Qin Tian completely put away his contempt. The book realm suppressed his realm, and the power of the word spirit of the annihilation word spirit could not be underestimated, especially when Yi Xian had integrated the word spirit into the sword. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. A ray of sword light flashed through the book realm. Qin Tian opened his palm and a powerful force gathered in his palm. When Yi Xian's sword arrived in front of him, he suddenly waved his palm and directly used his palm to block Yi Xian's sword. Rumble. The surrounding bookshelves trembled in fear. Although both of them were extremely powerful, the book realm was extremely stable. Even the surrounding bookshelves were not damaged in the slightest. At this moment Yi Xian held the sword and suddenly spun. Qin Tian's palm directly split open, and his whole body rapidly retreated. Yi Xian was about to exert force again when Qin Tian's right foot suddenly lightly stamped on the ground. He stopped and his left hand suddenly punched forward. A powerful force swept towards Yi Xian like a tide. Yi Xian directly ignored this force and fiercely spun the sword with both hands. Bang! Yi Xian's whole body directly flew out, and Qin Tian's right hand was cut in half by Yi Xian. After Yi Xian stopped, a trace of blood slowly flowed from the corner of his mouth. Yi Xian licked the blood from the corner of his mouth and said with a smile, "I haven't tasted blood in a long time." Fight. After coming to the fifth dimension he rarely fought. But at this moment when he fought with Qin Tian he once again found the feeling of fighting with his life on the line. Qin Tian looked at Yi Xian and said, "You will taste even more." At this moment Yi Xian suddenly jumped, holding the sword with both hands he fiercely slashed at Qin Tian. The sword slashed down and sword light flashed. Below, Qin Tian glanced at Yi Xian and the next moment his body directly turned illusory. Seeing this scene Yi Xian's expression suddenly changed. He was about to withdraw his sword when a powerful force suddenly exploded on his back. Bang! Yi Xian directly flew out, and the moment he was sent flying, a fist with an explosive sound went straight towards his head. Yi Xian horizontally blocked it. Bang! The executing heaven sword in Yi Xian's hand violently trembled, and then his whole body directly hit a distant bookcase. Just as he stopped, Qin Tian suddenly appeared in front of him. Qin Tian directly kicked Yi Xian's head. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly stabbed his sword towards Qin Tian's throat. A life for a life. At this time, Qin Tian suddenly withdrew his hand, and Yi Xian's sword pierced through empty air. In the distance Qin Tian looked at Yi Xian. In the end he did not exchange a life for a life with Yi Xian, because he was not sure that he could kill Yi Xian with a single palm strike. After all, Yi Xian's body was too strong, and his own body had no way to withstand Yi Xian's sword. Yi Xian's sword itself was extremely sharp, and on top of that he also had the word spirit. Not to mention his current body, even if his realm was not suppressed, he would not dare to use his own neck to withstand Yi Xian's sword. After Yi Xian forced Qin Tian to retreat, his right hand tightly gripped the executing heaven sword in his hand. He had to admit that he had somewhat underestimated Qin Tian's strength. Although the other party was tightly suppressed by him, his strength was still very strong. At this time, Qin Tian's body suddenly floated up, and a white fog suddenly appeared around him. Yi Xian frowned. "This is..." Lian Qian's voice sounded in his mind. "Be careful, this is the scholarly aura." Yi Xian was about to speak when the scholarly aura on Qin Tian's body suddenly transformed into a white dragon and flew out, and the white dragon pounced directly at Yi Xian. Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly and he took a step forward. He held the sword with both hands and slashed forward, and a wisp of red light silently appeared on the tip of the sword. Bang! As Yi Xian's sword slashed down, the white dragon was immediately forced to a stop. However, a large amount of white fog drowned Yi Xian, and his body had just come into contact with the scholarly aura when his body immediately started to corrode and fester. Yi Xian was shocked and he did not dare to resist it head-on. He immediately dodged, and at this moment the white dragon suddenly roared and then it charged towards him. Yi Xian stabbed out with his sword. A boundless sword. Bang! As the sword stabbed out, the white dragon directly exploded, and Yi Xian himself disappeared in an instant. In the distance Qin Tian, who was about to attack, suddenly frowned, and he glanced at the surroundings, but he did not see any traces of Yi Xian. At this moment he suddenly turned around, and as soon as he did, a wisp of sword light arrived in front of his forehead. Qin Tian's right hand suddenly clenched forward, and this clench directly grabbed Yi Xian's executing heaven sword. At this moment Yi Xian's right hand that was holding the sword spun. Swish! Qin Tian's 5 fingers were directly chopped off by the executing heaven sword. But at this moment, Qin Tian's fist also smashed against Yi Xian's chest. Bang! Yi Xian instantly retreated explosively, and in the process his executing heaven sword suddenly flew out. Flying sword. In the distance Qin Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and a white brush suddenly flew out from between his brows, and this white brush directly touched Yi Xian's executing heaven sword. Bang! The executing heaven sword trembled violently and directly flew out. In the distance, Yi Xian reached out and grasped, and the executing heaven sword fell into his hand, but his whole body trembled. It's the executing heaven brush. At this moment, Lian Qian's voice suddenly sounded in Yi Xian's mind. The executing heaven brush. Yi Xian glanced at the executing heaven brush in Qin Tian's hand and asked, "Can you hook it up?" Lian Qian replied, "Yes." Yi Xian's heart was filled with joy, but at this time, Lian Qian said, "You have to first let that brush leave his mind control. Only then can I establish a connection with that brush." Yi Xian asked in a low voice, "How do I do that?" Lian Qian replied, "I don't know." Yi Xian was speechless. At this time in the distance, Qin Tian suddenly pointed with a finger, "Execute." His finger landed on Yi Xian, and the executing heaven brush suddenly turned into a white light and flew out at an extremely fast speed. Yi Xian did not dare to be careless and immediately raised his sword to slash. A boundless sword. As the sword slashed down, a powerful force suddenly erupted from the book world, and Yi Xian had already disappeared. However, at the place where he disappeared, a wisp of blood floated. At the moment when Yi Xian disappeared, Qin Tian narrowed his eyes, and he gently pointed with his finger, "Defend." As soon as he said this, the executing heaven brush suddenly turned into a white light and appeared above his head, and his entire body was enveloped by the white light. At this time Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of Qin Tian, and at the same time his executing heaven sword directly slashed at the white light. Boom! The white light shook violently and cracked, but Yi Xian was instantly sent flying. As soon as Yi Xian stopped, he looked at his right hand, and at this moment his right hand had cracked and his bones were visible. Yi Xian looked at the executing heaven brush above Qin Tian's head with a solemn expression on his face. Lian Qian suddenly said, "This brush isn't simple at all. It can be used for both offense and defense. Moreover, this defense isn't just any defense, it can reflect the opponent's strength back to the opponent. Actually, you were injured by your own strength just now." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "It can reflect? Is it that heaven-defying?" Lian Qian said, "Yes. Moreover, this brush has two other functions and one of them is copy. It can copy the opponent's moves to counterattack." As soon as Lian Qian finished speaking, the executing heaven brush above Qin Tian's head suddenly transformed into a sword, and in the next moment, the sword transformed into a ray of light and slashed towards Yi Xian. Yi Xian was stunned when he saw this. Boundless sword. The sword that the executing heaven brush had transformed into was actually executing the boundless sword technique. Could it be done like this? Soon, the shock on Yi Xian's face turned into a strange expression. Sword. If the brush had transformed into a knife or something else, he would be a little afraid because the brush was indeed quite strong. However, this brush had transformed into a sword. Yi Xian did not dodge and let the sword stab into his forehead. At this moment, Lian Qian's voice suddenly sounded, "How should I say this?" Chapter 879. The sword pierced through his eyebrows like a stone falling into the sea. Yi Xian's body trembled slightly and then stopped moving. In the distance, Qin Tian was stunned. Soon, Qin Tian's expression changed because he found that he had lost contact with the brush. Qin Tian stared at Yi Xian. "Impossible. Absolutely impossible." Yi Xian greedily took a deep breath and smiled. "Dean Qin Tian, thank you." Qin Tian looked at Yi Xian with a sharp gaze. "How did you do it?" He knew that his punishment heaven brush must have fallen into Yi Xian's hands. Yi Xian grinned. "Why don't you guess?" Qin Tian was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. The person disappeared and the sword light appeared. Yi Xian's sword was extremely fast. Could be said that he had raised his sword speed to the extreme. Moreover, he was using the immeasurable sword and the word spirit of the extinguished character on the tip of the sword. Therefore, the power of this sword was extremely powerful. If it was outside, this sword was enough to split the space. However, this was the book realm. With the strength of Yi Xian and Qin Tian, they couldn't break the world inside. Opposite Yi Xian, Qin Tian looked at Yi Xian. When the sword was several zhang away from him, he suddenly disappeared. Yi Xian's sword pierced through the air. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Lian Qian suddenly said, "He left." Yi Xian's face darkened. How could he leave? Lian Qian said, "After all, he used to control the book realm. He knows the power and boundaries of the book realm very well." Yi Xian said in a deep voice. In other words, he is outside now? Lian Qian said, yes. Yi Xian was silent. As if she knew what Yi Xian was thinking, Lian Qian continued. With this book realm, you don't need to be afraid of him. If he wants to fight, just take him in. Of course, it will be difficult for you to kill him with your current strength. Yi Xian nodded. I know. If he wanted to kill Chen Tian, he wouldn't stand a chance unless he used the power of his bloodline. And once he used the power of his bloodline, he couldn't control himself. This was the most depressing part for him. Yi Xian was about to leave when Lian Qian suddenly said, wait a moment. You should first master this brush before you leave. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he asked, how long? He was still worried about Xiaoqi and the others. Lian Qian said, with the help of this brush, it will be very fast. Yi Xian nodded. Then let's begin. In less than an hour, Yi Xian had truly gained control of the Heaven Punishment Brush. This pen had 3 forms: attack, defense, and copy. It could be said that if his sword wasn't a celestial sword, he wouldn't be able to break through the defense of this brush. The copy ability was quite terrifying. It could copy some extremely powerful divine abilities and sword techniques. Of course, he wasn't thinking about its might, but that it could be used to frame others. Currently, he had the Executing Heaven Sword, Soul Suppressing Sword, Myriad Dimensional Mirror, Heaven Punishment Brush, and Book World. It was also because of these treasures that he was able to fight Chen Tian. Especially the Book World. If it wasn't for the Book World suppressing Chen Tian's realm, he wouldn't be able to fight Chen Tian even if he had these treasures. The Book World was the foundation for him to fight above his realm. After leaving the Book World, Yi Xian glanced at the surroundings. Chen Tian was no longer there. As if he thought of something, Yi Xian asked, Miss Lian Qian, are there many treasures in the Worldwide Academy? Lian Qian said, a lot. They should be in the hands of Chen Tian. Yi Xian nodded and asked again, are they familiar with you? Lian Qian said, many of them are familiar with me. However, there are also some that I'm not familiar with. Not only are they unfamiliar with me, but they've also fought with me before. Of course, they can't beat me because my big sister is very powerful. Yi Xian, Lian Qian said again, he still has something on him. The next time you meet him, you have to be careful of him taking it out. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly looked up. In the distance, several powerful auras were rushing over. They were Xianxia, Fu Wenzong, and the other experts. Xianxia appeared in front of Yi Xian. Seeing that Yi Xian was fine, he instantly heaved a sigh of relief. As if thinking of something, he hurriedly asked, have you fought with Chen Tian? Yi Xian nodded. Xianxia glanced at Yi Xian. He's dead? Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. How could that be? It's just that he couldn't do anything to me, so he left. Xianxia took a deep look at Yi Xian. We still underestimated your strength. He was very clear about Chen Tian's strength. Logically speaking, he was not someone that Yi Xian could fight against. However, Yi Xian was still alive. Xianxia collected his thoughts and looked at Yi Xian. Little Grandmaster, don't take such risks next time. Yi Xian nodded. All right. Xianxia shook his head and smiled. You're just brushing me off. Yi Xian smiled. Old Xin, let's not talk about this for now. Let's save my friends first. Xianxia nodded. Let's go. Yi Xian rode on his flying sword. At this moment, Xianxia pointed his finger and an orange talisman was stuck on Yi Xian's sword. In an instant, Yi Xian's flying sword's speed increased explosively. Yi Xian was shocked. His speed had increased by at least 30%. This was too terrifying. One had to admit that the rune Dao of the 5th dimension was really strong. Soon the group disappeared into the vast horizon. Somewhere above the sea of clouds, Xiaoqi, Lian Wanli, and Xianxia were standing on a cloud. In front of the 3 of them was an old man. This old man was Lu Yong. Around the 4 of them was a net that seemed to be weaved by lightning. This net covered the space around the 4 of them. Outside this net stood an old man. This old man was wearing a white robe and had his hands behind his back. Behind him were 9 people. These 9 people were very young, no more than 20 years old. However, the aura emitted from these people was extremely powerful. Martial Arts Pavilion. These were the students of the Martial Arts Pavilion. They could be said to be the elites of the elites in Wuyun. And the old man leading them was the Martial Arts Pavilion's pavilion master, Wu Chuan. This was an expert who had been famous for many years. In the distance, Lian Wanli, who was beside Xiaoqi, suddenly said, "Are we just going to wait like this?" Lu Yong nodded. "Wait for the people from my sect to come." Lian Wanli said, "It's not like we can't beat them." Lu Yong smiled bitterly. "Young lady, you might not know, but do you see the lightning net around us? This net is a huge array. Once you move, it will immediately activate and attract countless lightning to descend. At that time, those people outside will immediately make their move. We will be surrounded by enemies." Lian Wanli said, "But it is not good for us to wait like this." Lu Yong nodded. "I know. I have already received the news. Our Fu Wenzong experts will arrive in 15 minutes at most." Lian Wanli looked at Xiaoqi. "How strong are those people?" Xiaoqi glanced at Wu Chuan and the others. After a short moment of silence, she said, "I can only fight that old man." Lian Wanli looked at Xianxia. "Can the two of us defeat the others?" Xianxia glanced at the students of the martial arts pavilion. "No problem." Lu Yong was speechless. Right at this moment, Qin Tian suddenly appeared in front of Wu Chuan. Lu Yong's face instantly sank when he saw Qin Tian. Qin Tian glanced at Lu Yong and the others before he said, "Attack." As soon as he finished speaking, Wu Chuan, who stood behind him, suddenly opened his palm, and then a bolt of lightning suddenly flew out. Meanwhile, the lightning net suddenly trembled. In the next moment, countless bolts of lightning that were thick like pillars descended from the sky. Lu Yong's expression changed when he witnessed this scene. He suddenly soared into the sky and waved his right hand. An orange talisman suddenly flew out, and then a flaming shield appeared above him in the next moment. Meanwhile, the bolts of lightning descended. Bang! The flaming shield instantly cracked apart. Meanwhile, Lu Yong waved his right hand again and an orange talisman shot into the sky. In an instant, the flaming shield was transformed into a sea of flames. Meanwhile, Qin Tian suddenly gazed at Xiaoqi's group of three. In the next moment, he suddenly took a step forward. Meanwhile, Xiaoqi, who was seated cross-legged in midair, suddenly raised her head, and then she took a step forward and slashed with her sword. Bang! Her sword slashed down and Qin Tian was forced to stop in front of Xiaoqi. But right at this moment, Qin Tian suddenly smashed his left fist forward. His fist was like a collapsing mountain, and it carried an oppressive force that seemed capable of obliterating the world. At this moment, Qin Tian's cultivation hadn't been suppressed, and he was able to exert 100% of his strength. Xiaoqi's expression remained unchanged as she raised her sword to block it. Bang! Xiaoqi's sword wasn't able to block the force of Qin Tian's punch, and her entire body was blasted flying. Qin Tian was just about to attack again when a spear tore through the sky from the side. The spear was like a thunderclap and it was swift to the point it couldn't be seen by the eye. Qin Tian frowned slightly and then he turned around and tapped with his finger. This tap directly struck the tip of the spear. Bang! The spear shook violently and Xianxia was blasted flying along with her spear. But right at this moment, a dragon roar resounded. Qin Tian turned around and saw a saber descending straight towards his head, and there was the soul of an azure dragon on the saber. Qin Tian took a step back and he suddenly smashed his fist forward when the saber arrived around 1.5 m away from his head. Bang! The soul of the azure dragon exploded apart, and Qin Tian was blasted flying along with his saber. But right at this moment, a sword and a spear suddenly appeared behind him. Qin Tian turned around and pushed his arms forward. Rumble! The space in the surroundings trembled and Xiaoqi and Xianxia retreated repeatedly. However, Qin Tian had retreated by over 10 m as well. After Qin Tian stopped, his expression became extremely gloomy, and he didn't conceal his killing intent at all as he gazed at Xianxia and the others. Monstrous geniuses. He hadn't expected that there would be so many monstrous geniuses besides Yi Xian in the fourth dimension. Moreover, these three people were on the same side as Yi Xian. Once they were allowed to grow. When he thought up to here, the killing intent in Qin Tian's eyes grew denser. After a moment of silence, Qin Tian suddenly said, "Attack." As soon as he finished speaking, he charged forward while Wu Chuan and the others followed behind him. Obviously, he intended to kill Xiaoqi and the others here. In the distance, Xiaoqi was just about to attack when she suddenly looked to her right, and a ray of light tore through the sky towards her. Qin Tian stopped, turned around and saw Yi Xian. In next to no time, Yi Xian appeared not too far away from Qin Tian. Qin Tian gazed at Yi Xian and was about to speak. Right at this moment Yi Xian suddenly looked at Shao Qi. Can you hold him back? Shao Qi fell silent for a moment and then she said, How long? Yi Xian raised a finger. 15 minutes. I'll kill everyone in 15 minutes. Everyone was speechless. Chapter 880. Arrogant. When they heard Yi Xian's words, the faces of Wu Yuan and the other experts turned gloomy. What did Yi Xian take them for? Were they chickens, ducks, cows or sheep? Xianxia and the others who followed him were shocked as well. Kill everyone except Qin Tian in 15 minutes? Was he serious? One had to know that these people were the elites of the Myriad Dimension Academy. Shao Qi nodded when she heard Yi Xian's words. Sure. As soon as she finished speaking she stretched out her hand, and a sword suddenly flew out from Yi Xian's body. It was the sword that originally belonged to Shao Qi. Shao Qi closed her eyes slowly while holding the sword in her hand. After a moment of silence she suddenly looked at Qin Tian. A sword light flashed in her eyes, and the sword in her hand burst out like a bolt of lightning. It slashed straight at Qin Tian. In the distance Qin Tian suddenly said, Be careful of this person. As soon as he finished speaking he suddenly vanished on the spot. Boom. In the battlefield a sword light suddenly exploded. At this moment Yi Xian rushed out with a boundless sword. He didn't directly target Wu Chuan because he was the strongest person on Wu Yuan's side apart from Qin Tian. He wasn't confident that he could instantly kill Wu Chuan. He would kill the easy ones first. As soon as Yi Xian vanished, Wu Chuan vanished as well. He took a step forward, raised his hands and pressed down lightly. Fall. Rumble. The space in front of Wu Chuan suddenly fell layer by layer like a curtain of rain. However, Yi Xian passed through this curtain of rain with ease. Space Dao Law. Seeing this scene, Wu Chuan's expression changed drastically. He turned his head abruptly and behind him, a martial arts hall student's head had already flown off. This martial arts hall student raised his hands high. Obviously he had sensed Yi Xian but he was too slow. If he was any slower he would have lost his life. When Yi Xian killed this martial arts hall student with a single slash he immediately vanished. Wu Chuan's face turned ferocious as he glanced at his surroundings. At this moment, a ray of sword light suddenly appeared on his right. This sword light appeared without any warning. Wu Chuan's face paled. Be careful. Not far away that martial arts hall cadet reacted very quickly. When this wisp of sword light appeared he punched out with his right hand. Yi Xian's sword directly cut off that student's hand. That student wanted to retreat, but Yi Xian's sword was faster and instantly pierced through his forehead. Blood splattered everywhere. And Yi Xian disappeared again. Not far away, Wu Chuan's expression was extremely ferocious as he scanned the surroundings. Yi Xian, do you dare? Right at this moment a blood-red prisoner character suddenly appeared above Wu Chuan. At the same time, a strand of sword light appeared in front of him. At this moment Wu Chuan's heart skipped a beat. 6 paths of truth. As he spoke he suddenly circulated the mystic qi in his body and was about to make a move. But right at this moment, another mysterious force pressed down on his body. Sword domain. Wu Chuan was horrified. He suddenly roared, Essence return. Boom. His body exploded right away. A gust of strong energy swept across the field like a storm. Yi Xian, who was in front of him, kept retreating. At this critical moment, Wu Chuan directly abandoned his physical body because he knew that if he didn't abandon his physical body he would undoubtedly die. After Wu Chuan stopped, only his soul was left. In the distance, the sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly changed into the soul-suppressing sword. Be careful. From afar Qin Tian's voice suddenly sounded. Just as Qin Tian's voice fell, the soul-suppressing sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly appeared above Wu Chuan's head. Wu Chuan's face changed drastically and he was about to retreat. At this moment, the soul-suppressing sword turned into a ray of black light and sank into Wu Chuan's head. Bang! Wu Chuan's soul was directly absorbed by Yi Xian's soul-suppressing sword. Meanwhile Yi Xian opened his right hand, and the executing heaven sword appeared in his grasp. In the next moment, a ray of sword light flashed. In the distance the head of a student from the martial arts pavilion flew into the air. Instant kill. After Wu Chuan perished no one could stop Yi Xian. In just a short moment, the remaining students of the martial arts pavilion had been slaughtered by Yi Xian. Meanwhile, Xiaoqi, who was nearby, suddenly retreated while blood sprayed out of her mouth. Qin Tian wanted to continue attacking, but Xianxia and the others suddenly stood in front of Xiaoqi. Xianxia looked at Qin Tian and smiled. Mannerhead Qin, calm down. Qin Tian glared at Xianxia and said, Xianxia, Fu Wenzong, you Fu Wenzong will pay the price for what you did today. Xianxia shook his head and said, Mannerhead Qin, I Fu Wenzong have always been kind to others. It was your myriad-wide academy who risked their lives to go against us. We were also helpless. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian in the distance and said, Sai, little martial ancestor, you are really something. Why did you kill everyone else? As the saying goes, one should leave a way out for others to meet in the future. No matter what, you should at least leave someone alive. Yi Xian said with a straight face, It's my fault. Next time I will definitely leave someone alive for the Worldwide Academy. Xianxia nodded and looked at Qin Tian. Mannerhead Qin, don't be angry. Next time we will definitely leave someone alive for you. Qin Tian glanced at Xianxia and Qin Tian and said with a smile, This is just the beginning, isn't it? As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian and said, I'd like to see how much of a monster you are. As he finished speaking, he turned around and left. At the side, Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. His right hand gripped the executing heaven sword tightly as if he was about to make a move. At this time, Xianxia suddenly said, We won't be able to stop him. Lian Qian also said, For an expert like Qin Tian, if he wants to leave, you people won't be able to stop him. Don't waste your energy. Yi Xian fell silent. He was a little unwilling because he knew that now that Qin Tian was alone, it was the best time to kill him. However, he also knew that if an expert like Qin Tian wanted to leave, they really wouldn't be able to stop him. Yi Xian shook his head and gathered his thoughts. With a wave of his right hand, the nearby soul-suppressing sword flew into his hand. At this time, Soul's voice suddenly sounded in his mind. Young lord, this soul is so nourishing. Yi Xian said, Are you going to evolve? Soul said excitedly, It should be soon. If I still have such a powerful soul, I should be able to become even stronger. Yi Xian smiled and said, Very good. It could be said that the current soul-suppressing sword was even stronger than it was at its peak because it had been constantly devouring powerful souls. And every time it devoured a powerful soul, it was able to greatly improve. At this time, Soul said again, Young lord, I can nourish your soul now and make it even stronger. Yi Xian was a little curious. Nourish my soul? What does that mean? Soul smiled and said, It means that I'm using myself to nourish your soul. This way your soul can become even stronger. In the future, you'll have a great advantage when you fight powerhouses who are good at soul attacks. Or perhaps, you'll become even more powerful when you perform soul-related divine abilities and sword techniques. Yi Xian nodded. He was looking forward to Soul's evolution now. He had to admit that with Soul's help he could be said to be a powerhouse who was a natural counter to Soul's. At this moment, Xianxia suddenly said, Let's go back. Go back? However, Yi Xian shook his head. Old Shin, both of you should go back. I want to take a stroll. Old Shin immediately shook his head. No. You're definitely going to do something bad. Yi Xian was speechless. What was he talking about? Old Shin said in a deep voice, Little Grandmaster, you're now the most important person to me, Fu Wenzong. You can't take any risks. If anything happens to you, how are we going to explain it to the Patriarch? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment. Just when he was about to speak, Lu Yong suddenly said, Senior brother, let him go. Xianxia looked at Lu Yuan. You, Lu Yong said softly, Little Grandmaster isn't a flower in a greenhouse and we can't let him become one. We might be harming him by protecting him like this. Xianxia wanted to say something but Lu Yong said, Trust him. With Little Grandmaster's strength and strange movement technique, even a powerhouse like Qin Tian can't do anything to him if he wants to escape. Xianxia fell silent for a moment before he nodded. He looked at Yi Xian and said, You have to be careful when you're outside. Yi Xian smiled, I'll be careful. Xianxia suddenly pointed with his finger, and a 7-colored talisman suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. This is a world breaker talisman left behind by the Patriarch all those years ago. This talisman contains an extremely powerful force and it's too powerful for you to endure right now. Fortunately, your body is strong enough, so as long as you don't overuse this talisman, it won't be a big problem. Yi Xian was about to speak when Xianxia pointed with his finger again, and a white jade bottle appeared in front of him. This is the blood of the Heavenly Dragon Clan's Dragon Emperor. The Heavenly Dragon Clan's dragon ancestor gave it to the Patriarch all those years ago. The Patriarch didn't use it, so he kept it. However, there aren't many. There are only 3 drops left. Heavenly Dragon Clan. Yi Xian was slightly curious. Old Shin, what's the use of this blood? Lu Yong smiled and said, this is a great treasure. If you devour a drop of dragon blood, then you'll obtain the invincible strength of the Heavenly Dragon Clan. Simply speaking, devouring a drop of dragon blood can allow the young martial ancestor's current strength to increase by at least 10 times. 10 times. Yi Xian's expression instantly became solemn when he heard this. His current body wasn't weak at all, and if it was 10 times stronger, then he would be entirely capable of using his body to go head-on against Chen Tian. Meanwhile, Lu Yong said, not only can it increase the strength of your body, it can even strengthen your physical defenses. It can be said that the Heavenly Dragon ancestral blood is a priceless treasure in this era. Yi Xian didn't refuse. He put the 3 drops of Heavenly Dragon ancestral blood away, and then he bowed slightly to Elder Shin. Thank you, Elder Shin. Elder Shin flicked his finger again and a spatial ring descended before Yi Xian. There are 1,000 crystals in this spatial ring. Keep them and spend them. Besides that, there's a top-grade orange talisman in there. It's a spatial teleportation talisman. You can activate this talisman if you encounter danger, and it can instantly teleport you back to Fu Wenzong. However, you can't be careless. Some extraordinary experts are capable of cutting off your teleportation at will. Yi Xian nodded. Understood. Xianxia walked over to Yi Xian and patted Yi Xian on the shoulder lightly. Contact us if you have any problems or difficulties. Our Fu Wenzong doesn't have much, but we have a lot of money. Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 881. At this moment Yi Xian felt warm in his heart. He didn't reject it and kept the treasures. Yi Xian cupped his fists at Xianxia. Thank you, Old Shin. Old Shin smiled. We're on the same side. There's no need to be so polite. Yi Xian smiled. I'll bid farewell to my friends. Xianxia nodded. Go. Yi Xian walked toward Xiaoqi and the rest. Xianxia said softly, I, Fu Wenzong, am very lucky. Lu Yong, who was beside Xianxia, smiled. Senior brother, aren't you afraid that he will bring disaster to me, Fu Wenzong? Xianxia said softly. He wants to get benefits but doesn't want to contribute. How can there be such a good thing in this world? Lu Yong nodded. I've secretly investigated him. This person isn't an ungrateful person. If I, Fu Wenzong, treat him well, he will treat me well. As he spoke, he looked at Xiaoqi and the rest. I didn't expect these 3 girls to be so monstrous. This time I, Fu Wenzong, have really made a killing. Xianxia nodded and smiled. You've made a killing. As he said this, he seemed to have thought of something. His expression turned serious. You must be careful of the Worldwide Academy. Remember, let our people secretly protect them. Lu Yong nodded. Understood. What were geniuses most afraid of? Premature death. One could imagine that many years later, if Yi Xian and the rest didn't die, Fu Wenzong would definitely become a superpower in the 5th dimension. Especially Yi Xian. Yi Xian had the highest chance of drawing the 7-colored talisman. Therefore, Fu Wenzong was most worried about Yi Xian and the rest. In the distance, Yi Xian walked towards Xiaoqi and the rest. He looked at them and pointed his finger. 3 white jade bottles landed in front of the 3 girls. Spring of life. Lian Wanli grabbed a white jade bottle. She glanced at Yi Xian and said with a smile, How interesting. Yi Xian smiled and looked at 7. Are you okay? Xiaoqi shook his head. It's fine. Yi Xian nodded. Right, where's Immerse? Xiaoqi said. Immerse is about to break through, so we came first. He had to break through. Yi Xian smiled and said, It's a good thing. 7 looked at Yi Xian. How is Fu Wenzong? Yi Xian nodded. Very good. Xiaoqi nodded. Then we'll stay in Fu Wenzong for the time being. Yi Xian said, The 3 of you can cultivate in Fu Wenzong. Fu Wenzong doesn't have much, but it has money. If you need anything, you can look for Old Shen. With his help, I believe your strength will increase greatly. The three of them weren't weaker than him in terms of talent. What they lacked was resources. Once they had resources, the three of them would definitely soar. Lian Wanli suddenly asked, "Where are you going?" Yi Xian smiled, "I'm going to walk around and look for opportunities." Lian Wanli looked at Yi Xian, "I'll go with you." Yi Xian was stunned. Lian Wanli's brows raised, "No?" Yi Xian hesitated and was about to speak when Lian Wanli said, "Are you afraid that I'll drag you down?" Yi Xian shook his head and smiled, "Of course not." Lian Wanli said calmly, "Then why are you hesitating? Are you afraid that I will eat you?" Yi Xian smiled, "If you want to go, then let's go together." Lian Wanli nodded. She seemed to have thought of something and looked at Xianxia. "You don't mind, right?" Xianxia shook her head. Lian Wanli smiled, "Don't worry, I won't eat him." Xianxia said softly, "Be careful." A moment later, Yi Xian and Lian Wanli left. Seven and Xianxia followed Xianxia and the others back to Fu Wenzong. Fu Wenzong placed a lot of importance on Seven and Xianxia because their combat strength was too high. Although they didn't know Talisman Dao, they knew how to fight. What Fu Wenzong lacked the most now was people who could fight. Thus, Fu Wenzong was very happy about Seven and Xianxia's arrival. Somewhere in the clouds, Yi Xian rode on his sword and beside him was Lian Wanli. Actually, he didn't understand why Lian Wanli followed him. He knew that she definitely wasn't here to play. At this moment, Lian Wanli suddenly said, "Do you still remember Qingzhou?" "Qizhou." Yi Xian nodded, "I remember." How could he not remember that place? He and his sister Yiling came from that place. Of course, the place that left the deepest impression was Qingqing, country of Jiang. Old Yi Xian looked at Lian Wanli. "Why are you suddenly asking this?" Lian Wanli smiled, "Because we haven't gone back for a long time." "Go back." Yi Xian was silent. Lian Wanli tilted his head and looked at Yi Xian. "Have you thought about going back?" Yi Xian nodded, "Yes. Over there, there's still someone I miss." Lian Wanli said softly, "Her?" Yi Xian nodded. Lian Wanli smiled, "I thought you forgot about her." Yi Xian shook his head, "No." Lian Wanli nodded, "When are you going back?" Yi Xian looked at Lian Wanli, "You really want to go back?" Lian Wanli nodded, "The further I am from home, the more I miss it." Home. Yi Xian shook his head to him. That place was no longer home. Because Yiling was no longer in Qingcheng. Moreover, Xianxia, Lian Wanli and the others were all here. So, there was only one person in that place that he was reluctant to part with. Lian Wanli suddenly smiled, "No matter what, let's go back after some time. How about it? With our current strength, it won't take long to go back there." Yi Xian thought about it, then nodded, "All right. Let's go back together." Lian Wanli's lips curled up, "It's settled." Yi Xian nodded, "It's settled." Saying that, he looked at Lian Wanli, "You followed me out to talk about this?" Lian Wanli smiled, "Not really, I really want to follow you around and see if I can bask in your light and obtain some opportunities." Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Lian Wanli asked, "Where do you plan to go?" Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Ruins of a reason." This time his target was the ruins of the founder of the Limitless Sword. In the past, the prophet had gone to the ruins, but the prophet's vision was too high, and he only fancied the Limitless Sword, so he decided to take a look. Perhaps there would be a new harvest. To put it bluntly, it was to pick up scraps. Yi Xian asked in his heart, "Miss Lian Qian, how far are we from the ruins?" Lian Qian said, "Walk in this direction, there's still half a day left." Yi Xian frowned, "With my speed I still need half a day?" Lian Qian said, "Yes, that place is a bit far and it's very dangerous." Yi Xian was puzzled, "Dangerous? What do you mean?" Lian Qian said, "You'll know when the time comes." Yi Xian nodded, "No matter what, I have to go and take a look." Saying this, he seemed to have thought of something and asked, "Miss Lian Qian, from the looks of it, the strength of this Myriad Dimension Academy is quite strong." Lian Qian sneered, "Ignorant." Yi Xian was speechless. Lian Qian said in a low voice, "Let me tell you, don't ever look down on the Myriad Dimension Academy." Yi Xian said, "What do you mean?" Lian Qian said, "Let me tell you about the Worldwide Academy. After Master disappeared, the strongest person in the Worldwide Academy should be that female teacher. If she wants to kill you, let me tell you, unless that plainly dressed woman comes, no one can protect you. Even if Fu Wenzong gathers the strength of the entire academy, he won't be able to stop her. Yi Xian said in a low voice. That female teacher is that strong? Lian Qian said, very strong. Back then she was already unfathomable. Now she must be even stronger. Apart from her, the academy has 6 headmasters. These 6 were the strongest people in the academy, excluding the female teacher. Back then the 6 of them were already at the peak of the heavenly fate realm. Now with their talent and strength they should have reached the karma realm. However, I don't know if these 6 people are still in the academy. Speaking up to this point, she paused and then continued. Also, the worldwide academy has a great formation. It was left behind by the teacher in the past. This formation is called human slaying. The teacher said that there are no gods in the world, only powerful people. If the worldwide academy is in danger in the future, it must be the work of humans. Therefore, the teacher personally studied this great formation. Once this formation is activated, it can slay anyone. This is why even though the worldwide academy has declined, no one dares to enter the myriad dimension library. Because in this world, it is possible that no one can block this slash. Yi Xian suddenly said, what about the plainly dressed woman? Boom. A powerful force suddenly blasted Yi Xian's body. Yi Xian was directly sent flying. Lian Wanli, who was standing at the side, blinked her eyes in a daze. In the distance, Yi Xian said with some grievance, Miss Lian Qian, what are you doing? The one who attacked just now was naturally Lian Qian. Lian Qian said coldly, how can you be so stubborn? Yi Xian was speechless. Lian Qian said softly, I'm not joking with you. You must not underestimate the Myriad Dimension Academy. Besides the female teacher and the 6 great sect seniors that I told you about earlier, the Myriad Dimension Academy still has many formidable methods. Especially those powerful students and teachers. Most of them left the academy after the master disappeared. However, if the worldwide academy is in danger, I can guarantee that these people will definitely appear. Including that female teacher. Yi Xian was slightly puzzled. Why? Lian Qian said, because this is the academy left behind by the master. It can decline, it can destroy itself, but it cannot be destroyed by outsiders. Yi Xian was silent. Lian Qian said again, even I don't want the Myriad Dimension Academy to be destroyed. If you have the ability in the future, just kill that Qin Tian and the other leaders. Yi Xian smiled. Miss Lian Qian, it's them who want to destroy me. After a moment of silence, Lian Qian said softly, since you obtained this pagoda, you can also be considered as the master's successor. Therefore, I hope that you can protect the academy he left behind. Of course, I won't force you. Yi Xian smiled. Let's not talk about this troublesome issue. Lian Qian said, all right, we'll talk about the future in the future. Yi Xian started to speed up. Meanwhile, in the faraway Myriad Dimension Academy, Qin Tian was sitting in the study. He had been sitting here for a full 4 hours. At this time, an old man suddenly walked into the study. Qin Tian looked at the old man. How is it? The old man said in a deep voice. He is willing to personally kill Yi Xian. However, he said that this is not for you but for the future of the academy. Qin Tian was silent. The old man said again, he has already gone to find that Yi Xian. Since he agreed to personally take action, there shouldn't be any problems. P.S. Sorry, the update is over. There's no reason, no excuse, I overslept. I bow to everyone. Sorry. Chapter 882. After an unknown period of time, Yi Xian and Lian Wanli arrived at a mountain range. Instead of flying, they walked on foot. Deep in the mountains and ancient forests. That was what Yi Xian was feeling at the moment. Around him and Lian Wanli, ancient trees towered into the sky. The top of their heads was covered by countless leaves, preventing even the slightest bit of sunlight from entering. Around them, weeds were several zhang tall and densely packed, bringing with them a heavy sense of oppression. Lian Wanli said softly, this place has grown wild for who knows how long. Yi Xian nodded. He glanced around and said softly, be careful. One look and you could tell that this place wasn't a good place. Lian Wanli nodded slightly and the two continued forward. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, Miss Lian Qian, how much longer do we need? Lian Qian said, 2 hours. Yi Xian's expression froze. He smiled bitterly and said, why don't we just use sword kinesis flight? Lian Qian said softly, Respect. Yi Xian was silent. Lian Qian continued. When master came here he also advanced on foot to show his respect. Yi Xian said in a low voice, Miss Lian Qian, as far as I know, your master was already invincible in the world, right? Lian Qian said, you can say that. Yi Xian was about to say something but Lian Qian said, I know what you mean. Master didn't only respect the strong, he respected everyone. He said that every life should be respected. And in master's opinion, the strong shouldn't be measured by strength alone. Yi Xian asked, then what else should be measured by? Lian Qian said softly, reason. Yi Xian frowned slightly, what do you mean? Lian Qian said, if a strong person is willing to reason with someone weaker than him, then he is a strong person. Yi Xian shook his head. In his impression there were very few people who talked reason. Everyone talked about their fists, and whoever had the bigger fists was the one who was reasonable. As if she knew what Yi Xian was thinking, Lian Qian continued, that's why master said that this world is a sick one. People only believed in strength. They only believed in absolute strength because with strength they could do whatever they wanted. Of course, master didn't say that this is wrong. He said that this is the rule of this world because the weak will be bullied, and once a person is bullied they will want to become stronger, and then the whole world will continue this vicious cycle. When she spoke up to hear, she paused for a moment and said, master said that he wanted to create an equal world, a world that didn't rely on strength. Yi Xian quickly asked, and then? Lian Qian said, he left the world for a period of time. During that time he went to do this. Yi Xian asked again, did you succeed? Lian Qian said, I don't know. I only know that when he came back he told us that no matter what kind of world it was impossible to be absolutely fair. He said that he sealed the world's spiritual energy so there were no world-destroying powerhouses in that world, and the average lifespan was less than 100 years. But even so there were fights in that world, and the fights were very fierce. In the end he understood one thing, and that is that people will never be satisfied. Not only people but all living things are the same, they will never be satisfied. Moreover, as a person's strength gradually grows, his ambition will also grow. Yi Xian was silent. At this time, Lian Qian suddenly said, are you willing to reason with people who are weaker than you? Himself. Yi Xian smiled, if people don't bully me I won't bully them. If people bully me I will kill them. Lian Qian said softly, that's enough. Yi Xian said in a low voice, Miss Lian Qian, I think your master might want to change the world. Lian Qian smiled. He didn't want to, he has already done it. Therefore he founded the Worldwide Academy. Unfortunately, after he disappeared, the current Worldwide Academy has slowly deteriorated. Yi Xian nodded and was about to speak, when Lian Wanli suddenly said, look ahead. Yi Xian looked up. Not far in front of his door was a row of ancient trees, and this row of ancient trees directly blocked their path. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Miss Lian Qian, what is this? Lian Qian said in a low voice, let's go. Yi Xian nodded. He pointed with his finger and a ray of sword light cut through the air. The ancient tree in the distance was directly cut down, and behind the ancient tree there were weeds everywhere, and behind the weeds, a stone door could be faintly seen. Yi Xian said softly, have we arrived? Lian Qian said, we have. Yi Xian and Lian Wanli walked in front of the stone door, and just as he was about to attack he seemed to have thought of something. He bowed slightly and then put his finger together and lightly drew a line. The weeds were cut to pieces by the sword light, and behind the weeds was a stone door covered in runes. Yi Xian was about to attack, but at this time, Lian Qian suddenly said, do you want to die? Yi Xian was a bit puzzled. What do you mean, Miss Lian Qian? Lian Qian said, this is a seal that I borrowed master's strength in the past. If you attack forcefully, the rebound force will directly kill you. Yi Xian smiled awkwardly, then I'll have to ask Miss Lian Qian to attack. At this time, Lian Qian suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. She glanced at Yi Xian, then looked at the stone door. She opened her palm and silently muttered some terms that Yi Xian didn't understand. A moment later, the stone door in the distance suddenly became illusory, and after a dozen breaths, the stone door disappeared. Lian Qian looked at Yi Xian. Let's go. As soon as she finished speaking, she transformed into a ray of white light and vanished. Yi Xian nodded and walked through the stone door with Lian Qianli. After passing through the stone door, there was only darkness, and an oppressive feeling assaulted their faces. Xian opened his palm and a moonstone flew out. But at this moment, a ray of sword light suddenly slashed the moonstone. Bang! The moonstone directly exploded. Xian frowned slightly. This is, Xian said, the sword spirit of this place. There was a sword here in the past, the blind swordsman's sword, and the sword spirit has always been guarding this place. Master wanted to take it away but it was unwilling. You have to be careful, the sword spirit of this sword is extremely powerful, and you can't underestimate it. Xian nodded and he glanced at the surroundings before walking towards the depths of the cave. At this moment, a ray of sword light suddenly cut through the air in front of him. Xian blocked it with his sword. Bang! A powerful force instantly blasted Xian out of the cave, and Qianli was also blasted out together with him. Outside the cave, Xian frowned slightly. Was this sword really that powerful? Without thinking too much, Xian was about to make a move when Qian suddenly appeared in front of the cave. She looked into the cave and asked, "Do you still remember me?" At this moment, the faint sound of a sword humming came from inside the cave. Qian turned to look at Xian. "Let's go." After saying that, she led Xian and Qianli into the cave. The cave was still pitch black, but after walking for about 15 minutes, the three of them heard the gurgling sound of a stream. Xian looked into the distance. There was an exit in the distance and from this exit he saw a waterfall. After exiting the cave, their field of vision suddenly widened. In front of them was a small waterfall and below the waterfall was a pool of water. All around them was a sea of flowers. Xian looked at the bottom of the waterfall. On the pool of water, there was a middle-aged man with his eyes covered by a black cloth. The middle-aged man was dressed very simply in simple cotton clothes. From his appearance, there was nothing special about him and he looked no different from an ordinary person. At this moment Xian and Qianli suddenly turned their heads to look. Not far away from the flowering shrubs on the right, a woman wearing a cotton dress walked out. The woman held a bouquet of flowers in her hand, and her body emitted a domineering aura. Sword spirit. After this woman came out, she looked at Qian and said, "Long time no see." Qian nodded. "Yes, it has been a long time." The woman walked to the side of the pool and placed the bouquet of flowers in her hand into the pool. Then she asked softly, "Where is your master?" Qian shook her head. "He disappeared." The woman frowned and looked at Qian. "In this world no one can kill him." Qian said softly, "He disappeared. But he wasn't killed by anyone. As for where he went, even I don't know. It's like he evaporated into thin air." The woman fell silent for a moment before she said, "He's a very extraordinary person." Qian smiled and said, "Your master is very powerful as well." The woman looked at the middle-aged man in the middle of the pool and said softly, "During Master's era, after Master became famous, he had never tasted defeat. But if you compare him to your master, he's still lacking. Your master is the strongest person I've ever met." Qian shook her head. "He was." The woman turned to look at Qian and asked, "What do you mean?" Qian said softly, "I met a very strong woman in the fourth dimension, so strong that she's unreasonable." The woman frowned slightly. "Stronger than your master?" Qian said in a low voice, "I don't know. I only know that if she fought Master might not be able to defeat her. Right, she's also a swordsman." "Swordsman?" The woman's brows raised slightly when she heard Qian. "She's a swordsman?" Qian nodded, "Yes." The woman looked straight at Qian. "You mean she's stronger than my master?" Qian glanced at the middle-aged man in the pool not far away. "Your master is the strongest swordsman I've ever met in the fifth dimension, but that woman should be stronger than your master." "Ridiculous." The woman's expression suddenly became cold. "If you say that your master is stronger than my master, I'll admit it. But I don't believe that there's a swordsman in this world who's stronger than my master in the way of the sword. Absolutely impossible." Qian shook her head. "You should go out and take a look." She knew that the master of the sword spirit in front of her was very strong. How could a person who could create the infinite sword not be strong? But that woman was even stronger. That woman was so strong that she was unreasonable. At this time, the woman not far away suddenly said in a cold voice, "In my heart, all the swordsmen in this world added together can't even compare to a single hair on my master's head. At this time, the sound of a sword suddenly rang out from within Yi Xian's body. The next moment, the sword of the plain-dressed woman suddenly flew out. Its speed was extremely fast, and like a sudden clap of thunder, it instantly slashed towards the woman. At this time, the female sword spirit suddenly stood up, her eyes as cold as ice, impudent. As her voice fell, a powerful sword force erupted from her body. Chapter 883. The female sword spirit's face instantly turned as cold as ice when she saw that the sword was targeting her. Powerful sword aura swept out from her body, but as the sword slashed over, her sword aura instantly vanished into thin air. The female sword spirit's expression instantly changed when she witnessed this scene. However, she didn't shrink back. She stomped her right foot on the ground and transformed into a ray of light that shot forward explosively. Under the gazes of Yi Xian's group of 3, the two swords slashed against each other. They were evenly matched. Bang! A ray of light flew out. It was the female sword spirit who flew out. After the female sword spirit stopped moving in the distance, her figure instantly became ethereal. That attack had almost destroyed her spirit. Meanwhile, the woman's sword suddenly trembled violently, and a sword howl reverberated through the sky. Yi Xian was able to sense that the sword was looking down upon him. It wasn't just looking down upon the female sword spirit, it was looking down upon everything in the world. It was filled with invincible confidence. Just like the woman in a plain dress. Lian Qian took a deep and long glance at the sword that floated in the distance, and there was a trace of fear in her eyes. At this moment, she knew that she'd underestimated the woman in a plain dress. Because the strength of the sword was too heaven-defying. The sword was strong because of its master. The sword was as strong as the woman in a plain dress was. This was the mortal realm. The sword was extraordinary because of its master. Meanwhile, the woman's sword suddenly transformed into a ray of light that entered Yi Xian's body. Yi Xian gazed at the female sword spirit, and the latter's gaze was slightly dazed. She'd lost. Moreover, she'd lost so easily that she didn't even have the strength to fight back. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Young miss." The sword spirit gazed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. "I've always felt that one has to experience failure to grow. If a person continues to be invincible, then that person will never know what he's lacking. So long as he fails once, then that person will notice that he has many flaws and inadequacies. Only those who have experienced failure will become stronger." Failure? Yi Xian was never afraid of failure. What he was afraid of was not having a chance to start over after failure. Therefore, some failures were acceptable, but some failures were absolutely unacceptable. For some failures you could start all over again, but for some failures, you would never have the chance to make a comeback. The sword spirit looked at Yi Xian. "Are you a swordsman?" Yi Xian nodded. Meanwhile, Lian Qian spoke abruptly, "Miss Sword Spirit, I've come this time because I want him to inherit your master's inheritance in the sword Dao." The sword spirit looked at Yi Xian again. After a while she shook her head. "Too weak." Yi Xian smiled and said, "If I were invincible in this world, why would I need senior's inheritance?" The sword spirit remained silent. Lian Qian looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian understood what Lian Qian meant. He suddenly disappeared. Boundless sword. His understanding of the boundless sword could be said to be extremely deep. Presently, executing the boundless sword was extremely easy for him. Moreover, it was extremely powerful. A trace of surprise flashed in the sword spirit's eyes when she saw the boundless sword. She suddenly moved her right hand horizontally to block, and a sword light flickered in her right hand. Bang! A sword was directly blocked by her right hand. However, Yi Xian had vanished. The sword spirit swept the surroundings with her gaze, and then she suddenly pressed her fingers together and tapped lightly. A strand of sword light flew out from the tip of her finger. The sound of something tearing resounded. Space had suddenly split apart over 100 m away, and then Yi Xian walked out from within it. Yi Xian gazed silently at the sword spirit. He realized that his boundless sword was completely useless against this woman. Moreover, she knew where he was. The sword spirit glanced at Yi Xian. "He did very well." Yi Xian nodded. "Thank you." The sword spirit turned around to look at the middle-aged man at the center of the pool. A short moment later she spoke softly, You aren't the most suitable person in Master's heart. But I know that he won't be able to wait for someone more suitable than you. Come here. Yi Xian walked over to the sword spirit's side and she spoke softly, "Greet him." Yi Xian bowed respectfully to the middle-aged man. The woman spoke softly, "Since you're Master's successor, then you should know about Master's background and some things. Master's name was Xianxia in the beginning and he was a prince of Xia. Later on he was betrayed by his imperial concubine, and his eyes were stabbed blind. His meridians were shattered and he became a cripple who couldn't cultivate." Yi Xian asked, "Then how did he become a formidable swordsman in the end?" The woman said, "Master was unable to become a normal cultivator, so he created 2 cultivation techniques. A self-created cultivation method." Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "What cultivation techniques?" The woman stood up and said, "Cultivate the heart, cultivate the soul. Cultivate the heart, cultivate the soul." The woman continued, "The so-called cultivation of the heart is the cultivation of the sword. The heart is the sword and the sword is the thought. It doesn't rely on the body or the soul, and wherever the heart goes, the sword goes." At this point she slowly closed her eyes. At this moment, a sword suddenly condensed between her brows, and in the next moment the sword vanished. Yi Xian was stunned. The woman glanced at Yi Xian and didn't speak. Yi Xian was still stunned. Lian Qian suddenly said, "1,000 miles away." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression changed abruptly and he looked into the distance. At the end of his vision a sword was floating in the air. 1,000 miles away. At this moment Yi Xian's expression became extremely solemn. The woman spoke again, "Actually you haven't brought out the full power of your boundless sword because you lack the core cultivation technique. This boundless sword can only be unleashed to its greatest extent by using the heart sword mental cultivation method." Yi Xian spoke solemnly, "You mean that this boundless sword is a flying sword?" The woman nodded, "It is. This boundless sword has another name 1,000 miles away. It can instantly kill everything within 1,000 miles. 1,000 miles. Yi Xian fell silent. This isn't 3 kilometers, it's 1,000 miles. Meanwhile the woman spoke again, "Master, besides this boundless sword there's another sword technique." "No, it can't be called a sword technique, it's a form of the sword Tao." Yi Xian was very curious. "What form?" The woman spoke softly, "Sword rule. The so-called sword rule is the heavy sword and the light sword. The light sword focuses on speed and only speed can't defeat all martial techniques in the world. So, the form of the light sword has to be fast, so fast that the enemy can't defend against it." Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "What about the heavy sword?" The woman said, "The heavy sword focuses on using one's strength to overcome 10 techniques. Under one sword all techniques can be broken." As she spoke she looked at Yi Xian. When Master's body recovered he could freely switch between the light sword and the heavy sword. At that time no one was his opponent. Heavy sword. Light sword. Yi Xian fell silent. He had already seen the power of the light sword. This boundless sword, its power naturally went without saying. If the light sword was so powerful, would the heavy sword be weak? What if the light sword and heavy sword were combined? Wouldn't that be heaven-defying? At this time, Lian Wanli suddenly asked, "Isn't there another cultivation method?" The woman nodded. "Master also created a cultivation method, the soul. The soul doesn't rely on the body but on the soul." As she spoke she looked at Yi Xian. "Master's strongest back then wasn't the light sword or heavy sword, but the light sword, heavy sword and the soul form." As she spoke her right hand suddenly pressed on Yi Xian's shoulder. In the next moment Yi Xian's soul was directly pulled out by her. The woman said, "Try the boundless sword." Yi Xian hesitated then asked, "Soul?" The woman nodded. Yi Xian nodded. He opened his palm and the heaven-punishing sword appeared in his hand. Although he was a soul form he could still use sword techniques. Of course it wasn't that powerful. Yi Xian swung his sword and the sky thousands of feet away suddenly split open. Boundless sword. Its power was at least half of the original. Yi Xian's soul returned to his body and he said in a deep voice, "Miss Sword Spirit, I feel that my body is a little stronger. Moreover, although the soul can use sword techniques but besides being slightly faster it's meaningless." The woman looked at Yi Xian. "That's because you haven't seen the power of the soul." Yi Xian said, "Miss, please demonstrate." The woman glanced at Yi Xian. Do I have a soul? Yi Xian, the woman said softly, do you know the power and uniqueness of the soul? Yi Xian bowed slightly. Miss, please show me. The woman said, when the soul leaves the body, although it doesn't have the support of the body, it also doesn't have the shackles of the body. To put it bluntly, there were 3 benefits to having a soul. First, it was light. Your soul would be as light as a feather in this world. Under such circumstances, no matter what sword technique you used, even if you didn't have the support of your physical body, you would still be able to become faster. Your boundless sword just now can actually be faster. Yi Xian said in a deep voice. What's the second benefit? The woman said, soul power. The soul has the power of the soul, which is also soul power. Your soul power and body are very strong. If you fuse Master's sword rule with this soul power, it will become very powerful. The biggest benefit of the soul is that you can cultivate the power of yin and yang. The soul is yang and the body is yin. Only the soul can absorb the power of yin and yang, and the power of yin and yang can make your sword stronger. Simply put, even if the world is without spirit energy, it won't affect you because you cultivate the power of yin and yang, and the power of yin and yang is contained in your soul, so you can use it with your body. Yi Xian understood when he heard this. The soul was a different way of cultivation, a new way of cultivation that left the body, and it was a little similar to his invincible sword body. Even the cultivation methods were different. Meanwhile, the woman said, start with the sword rule. I'll teach you the mental cultivation method now. As for how far you can cultivate it, it'll depend on your own ability. As soon as she finished speaking, she pointed with her fingers, and a white light suddenly entered Yi Xian's mind. In next to no time, some information appeared in Yi Xian's mind. Heart sword mental cultivation method and sword soul mental cultivation method. As if he had obtained a treasure, Yi Xian started to absorb it crazily. In the following time, Yi Xian started to cultivate the sword rule. He started with the light sword, which was the immeasurable sword. Flying sword. After adding the heart sword mental cultivation method, Yi Xian realized that the speed of the immeasurable sword was at least a few times faster than before. The real flying sword could take a person's head from 1,000 miles away. In a courtyard somewhere in the worldwide academy, a middle-aged man suddenly stood up. He was the strategist who had gone to the 4-dimensional universe. And he was in charge of looking for Yi Ling. The strategist looked at the old man who suddenly appeared in front of him. Still no news about Yi Ling? The old man shook his head. There's no news about the 4-dimensional universe. The strategist said in a deep voice. What about the 5-dimensional universe? The old man said, our people have already gone out to look for him. Not only that, I've also asked the strategist sect for help. The strategist sect. The strategist nodded slightly. With their help, it should be easy to find Yi Ling. The old man nodded. They said they already have some clues. Let's get ready to capture him. The strategist immediately said, let's go. As soon as he finished speaking, the two of them disappeared from the scene. P.S. I've already bought a small motorcycle. I'm going to replace it with 4 wheels in 2 years. I have a 2-story old house. The decoration is average, but it's livable. With a car and a house, I feel that there's nothing more to pursue in life. I have a weak question. At my age, this is already considered amazing, right? Chapter 884. Yi Ling. The Worldwide Academy had never given up looking for Yi Ling because they knew that Yi Ling was the person Yi Xian cared about the most. If they could find Yi Ling, they would be able to control Yi Xian. Unfortunately, their people had been searching for a long time in the 4th dimension, but there was no news. Therefore, they decided to search in the 5th dimension. However, the intelligence of the Worldwide Academy had never been good. Therefore, they found the strategist sect. The position of the strategist sect in the 5th dimension was a bit special. This special was not because of their strength, but because of their intelligence. It could be said that other than the top forces, the strategist sect's intelligence was the strongest. The strategist sect was also smart. They never participated in any power struggles. They only did intelligence. Anyone, any force, as long as they paid them, they would let you know what you wanted to know. The strategist sect. The strategist sect was located on the Strategist Mountain. This mountain was 90,000 feet high, and the sect was in the middle of a sea of clouds. Standing there, it was like being in a fairyland. At this moment, above the strategist sect, an old man was spinning a wheel, his mouth constantly muttering something. This person was the sect master of the strategist sect, Xianxia. Next to Xianxia there was an old man. This person was the great elder of the strategist sect, Xianxia. After a while Xianxia suddenly stopped and the wheel in front of him trembled slightly. At the same time, a light screen appeared not far from him, but it was blurry. Xianxia looked at Xianxia. "Senior brother?" Xianxia said softly, "It will appear soon." Xianxia said in a deep voice, "Senior brother, as far as I know, Yi Xian values his sister Yi Ling. If we find his sister for the Worldwide Academy, I'm afraid. You also know that he has Fu Wenzong behind him." Fu Wenzong? Xianxia nodded. "Of course I know that he has Fu Wenzong behind him, but now that the Worldwide Academy and Fu Wenzong are at war, and we are so close to the Worldwide Academy, if we don't take sides, do you think the Worldwide Academy will let us go?" Xianxia said in a deep voice, "We have never participated in worldly affairs, Xianxia said. "That was before. Now we have to participate. Of course we don't have to get too involved. We're just providing information to the Worldwide Academy, aren't we?" Xianxia sighed softly and did not say anything else. Xianxia continued, "Moreover, the Worldwide Academy's remuneration is not small. It would be a waste not to earn it." Xianxia was about to speak when the screen of light before them suddenly trembled. It didn't take long for a wasteland to appear on the screen of light. Seeing this wasteland, Xianxia frowned slightly. Why does it look a bit familiar?" At this time the screen moved forward and soon came to a door. When they saw this door, Xianxia's and Xianxia's expressions changed. "It's the Azura Hell. Oh my god." After saying that, he was about to put away the roulette. At this moment a little girl appeared on the screen. The little girl was wearing a short black dress and her eyes were as black as the abyss. The little girl looked in front of her. "You're looking for me?" Hearing this, Xianxia knelt down with a thud and said in a trembling voice, "Empress. This is a misunderstanding." At this moment an old man quietly appeared behind Xianxia. Xianxia's expression changed greatly and he quickly kowtowed. "Empress, spare me, this is what the Worldwide Academy told me to do. Empress, spare me." At this moment Xianxia's head was pounding like garlic. Xianxia was also extremely shocked and his whole body was trembling. "Shura Empress. Among the 6 powerhouses in the world, this Shura Empress was the most powerful existence. In this woman's eyes, there were only the living and the dead." The old man behind Xianxia was about to make a move, but at this moment Yi Ling suddenly turned around and the old man disappeared. The roulette in Xianxia's hand directly exploded. At the same time Xianxia's eyes directly exploded and blood splashed. At this moment the entire Xiantian sect began to collapse layer by layer. In less than a few breaths, the entire heavenly strategist sect turned into dust. However, Xianxia was still alive, but he had lost his eyes and his cultivation. He had completely become a cripple. At this time the strategist and the others arrived. When they saw this scene, the strategist and the others were stunned. A moment later the strategist quickly appeared in front of Xianxia. "Old Xian, this is..." Xianxia knelt on the ground. He was silent for a long time. Finally he got up and said softly, "My heavenly strategist sect has offended a peerless powerhouse." The strategist frowned slightly. "Peerless powerhouse? Who?" Xianxia shook his head. "It doesn't matter." After saying that, he turned around and left. At this time the strategist quickly said, "Old Xian, that Yi Ling." Xianxia stopped and sighed. "I almost found her. Unfortunately." After saying that, he shook his head. "I can be sure that she is in the 5th dimension, but where she is, the old man doesn't know." After saying that, he walked into the distance. In the same place, the strategist looked in the direction that Xianxia left and said softly, "This matter is a bit strange. Go and find out who did it just now." Behind him a man quietly left. At this time an old man said in a deep voice, "That Yi Ling is in the 5th dimension." The strategist nodded. "As long as she is in the 5th dimension." After saying that, he turned his head and looked in front of him. Now there was only a ruin in front of him. The strategist frowned slightly. Who has such powerful strength to be able to destroy this celestial strategist sect so easily? The old man nodded. To be able to destroy a sect so easily, It is definitely not an ordinary person or an ordinary force. I really don't know who this celestial strategist sect provoked to be completely destroyed. It is not an ordinary tragedy. The strategist shook his head. This matter will naturally be investigated. I will give you a task. Use all the intelligence of the academy to find this Zhou Xian. Not only our people but also other sections. You must find this Yiling. The old man nodded and then turned around and left. The strategist slowly closed his eyes. Yiling. His goal was to find Yiling. Because Zhou Xian had Fu Wenzong's protection, it was very difficult to kill Zhou Xian. And Yiling was Zhou Xian's flaw. Once this flaw was found, the worldwide academy could defeat Zhou Xian in one blow. At this time the strategist said again, find this Yiling at all costs. In the distance Xiantian stopped. He suddenly knelt on the ground and burst into tears. At this moment he was crying like a child. In any case, the celestial strategist sect had been passed down for tens of thousands of years. Moreover, it was getting stronger and stronger. However, it was destroyed in his hands. As if thinking of something, Xiantian suddenly raised his head and roared, "Worldwide Academy." His voice was full of resentment. If it wasn't for the Worldwide Academy, the celestial strategist sect wouldn't have caused such a disaster. Find Yiling? Zhou Xian's younger sister? Xiantian suddenly roared again. Find your ancestor. Find your ancestor from the Worldwide Academy. After a while Xiantian gradually calmed down. At this moment he suddenly thought of something. That was, he didn't find the wrong person. He was looking for Yiling. Then there was a problem. Why did he look for the Shura Empress? As if thinking of something, Xiantian's face instantly changed. The Shura Empress is Yiling. In fact, he already had this idea from the beginning. However, at that time he felt that it was ridiculous. Coupled with the sadness in his heart, he didn't think much about it. But now that he thought about it carefully, he realized that the Shura Empress was very likely to be Yiling. The Shura Empress was Zhou Xian's younger sister? Xiantian's scalp went numb as he thought about it. Zhou Xian. After a while Xiantian slowly walked into the distance. His top priority now was to recover his body. Then he would go and seek refuge with Zhou Xian. Naturally he wanted to make a comeback. To make a comeback he needed help. He couldn't count on the Worldwide Academy anymore. Now that his sect had been annihilated, he didn't have the slightest value to the academy. He could only look for someone else. And he decided to look for Zhou Xian. Fu Wenzong. Fu Wenzong also received the news that the celestial strategist sect had been destroyed. Regarding this sudden incident, Fu Wenzong was also shocked. After all, although the celestial strategist sect wasn't that powerful, it wasn't that weak either. Who could have destroyed the celestial strategist sect without a sound? Inside the rune palace, Xianxia was silent for a long time. Finally he looked at Lu Yong beside him. Send someone to investigate and find out who did it. Lu Yong nodded. I've already sent someone to investigate, but I'm afraid there won't be any results. The other party was able to destroy the celestial strategist sect so easily. This kind of expert, if he doesn't want others to know, it will be very difficult for outsiders to find out. Xianxia nodded slightly. Indeed. As he spoke he stood up and looked into the distance. There was a trace of worry in his eyes. I wonder how the little grandmaster is doing. Zhou Xian. They were very worried about Zhou Xian. Although Zhou Xian was strong enough, there were also crouching tigers and hidden dragons in the fifth dimension. At this moment Lu Yong suddenly said, that Miss Xiaoqi seems to be about to break through. Break through? Xianxia hurriedly said, let's go. After speaking he left the rune palace with Lu Yong and the others. Protect Xiaoqi. Fu Wenzong attached great importance to Xiaoqi and Enlanxio because these two women's talent was too terrifying. It could be said that if Zhou Xian didn't use those external objects, he might not be able to defeat these two women. Zhurhel. After Yiling destroyed the celestial strategist sect, she turned around and walked towards the door. At this moment the two old men behind her suddenly knelt on one knee. One of them said fiercely, Master, the Worldwide Academy actually issued a warrant for Master. They deserve to die. Master, please allow me to lead 300 Azura cavalry to trample the Worldwide Academy. Yiling stopped in her tracks. No need. The old man was about to speak when Yiling turned her head and looked in the direction of the Worldwide Academy. Aren't they looking for me? I'll go personally. After speaking, she suddenly disappeared. Chapter 885. Within the Worldwide Academy. Within the study, Qin Tian looked at the ancient book in his hands quietly. Every day he would take some time out to read. This was what the Prophet had requested of them, and after so many years he had gotten used to it. As though he thought of something, Qin Tian put down the book in his hands and looked ahead. Is there any news of Zhou Xian? Where Qin Tian's gaze landed, an old man appeared like a specter. The old man wore a loose robe, his hands hidden in his sleeves, and he exuded a chilling aura. The old man shook his head. There is no news of Qin Yiming at the moment. However, since he has agreed to appear, it should not be a problem. Qin Yiming, one of the 6 headmasters of the Worldwide Academy. Qin Tian asked softly, what about the other 5? The old man replied solemnly, the other 5 did not respond to us. However, if there comes a day when the academy faces a life and death situation, I believe that they and the headmaster will appear. Qin Tian shook his head and laughed. Elder Yu Shuang, do you think that it's because I'm the academy master that they are not returning? The old man called Yu Shuang shook his head. You have your reasons, but it is not entirely your fault. After teacher disappeared, most of them went to look for him. To them, the academy with teacher is their academy. This is also the reason why they did not come out to fight for the position. However, some of them left because of you. After all, after you took over, everything you did was different from when teacher was still around. Qin Tian said in a light voice. All those years ago, teacher established the Myriad Dimension Academy with the intention of enlightening all living beings. The academy doesn't select people based on natural talent or background. So long as one is willing to learn, then anyone can enter my Myriad Dimension Academy. Even those students that represent a power are able to enter my Myriad Dimension Academy. But Sir didn't think that after these people finish their studies in the Worldwide Academy, they wouldn't be used by the Worldwide Academy at all. Yu Shuang said, although these people are not used by my Worldwide Academy still has students all over the 5 dimensions. Who would dare to bully my Worldwide Academy? Qin Tian looked at Yu Shuang. That is because teacher is here. With teacher around, the multidimensional universe has order. Who dares to bully my Worldwide Academy? But teacher is no longer here. Yu Shuang was silent. Actually, he also knew that when the Prophet was around, the Prophet could do whatever he wanted. Because the Prophet was powerful, no one dared to bully the Worldwide Academy. However, now that the Prophet had disappeared, there was no one in the Worldwide Academy who could control the 5-dimensional universe. Even if she was a female teacher, she could only protect the Worldwide Academy at most. It was impossible for her to manage other forces. Therefore, after the Prophet disappeared, many of the policies that he left behind could no longer be implemented. This was because the Worldwide Academy was no longer the leader. They would no longer listen to the Worldwide Academy. At this time, Yu Shuang sighed. Actually, it wasn't easy for you. At that time, the experts of the Worldwide Academy had all left and disappeared. When Qin Tian took over, he was only at the Yin-Yang realm. At that time, if not for the Prophet's influence, the Worldwide Academy would have been long gone. Although many forces were still afraid of the Worldwide Academy, in their hearts they no longer revere this place. As if thinking of something, Yu Shuang said, however, there is one thing that you did that was very unwise. It was that Zhou Xian. Because of this person, many of our people have died. Qin Tian was silent. Yu Shuang continued. Presently, my Myriad Dimension Academy has entered into conflict with the Talisman sect. It can be said that since we've been targeting Zhou Xian, we haven't obtained the slightest benefit, and we've suffered incessant deaths instead. Furthermore, our Worldwide Academy has become like a secular power fighting for power. This has gone against Mr.'s original intentions. AI. Qin Tian spoke softly. We have no way out. That Zhou Xian has gained the recognition of the World Prison Pagoda. We are fated to fight to the death with him, unless we are willing to hand over the Universal Library to him. As for him, Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Zhou Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Zhou Xian's position as the prince shall be removed, and Yi Lang shall take over. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the Yi clan's elders. Why? Right at this time, a timid voice rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yiling and was Yi Xian's sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yiling, what are you doing?" The girl called Yiling bowed to everyone in the ancestral hall and asked timidly, "Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason?" The Great Elder looked coldly at Yiling. "This is a clan matter, what are you butting in for? Leave." Yiling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the Great Elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, "Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince." Impudent. The Great Elder suddenly raged. "Whether he's stripped or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this time the new prince Yilang suddenly laughed. "He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others." The Great Elder replied coldly, "Then flog him 30 times. Very quickly 2 Yi clan's guards rushed in. Yiling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years and even now he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yilang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, "Young master Yilang inherits the title of prince. What are you yelling about?" As he spoke he raised his hand and slapped Yiling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded and the right side of Yiling's face instantly swelled up. However, she did not cry and only held her cheek tightly. Yilang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard quickly bowed. "This subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince." Yilang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the prince I'll need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and quickly bowed deeply. "This subordinate will go through fire and water for the prince and I'll do anything for you." Yilang nodded. "Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Don't hold back, understand?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yilang and when he saw the murderous intent in Yilang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yiling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something and he suddenly stopped. Inside the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside the hall. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe and the robe was tattered and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Yi Xian who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yilang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall the elders frowned. The Great Elder narrowed his eyes and his face was dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yiling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yilang and was about to speak. At this moment Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Ping! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. Yilang did not stop there and charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time Yilang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you!" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yilang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yiling's side. Seeing Yiling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yiling saw Yi Xian, tears welled up in her eyes. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Ping! Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides there were the elders of the Yi clan. Why? Right at this moment, a slightly timid voice suddenly resounded within the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yi Ling and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that Yi Xian was to be replaced, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the hall and asked timidly, "Great elder, my brother Yi Xian is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason?" The great elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. "This is a matter of the clan, what are you interrupting for? Leave." Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the great elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, "Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince. This is truly unfair. Impudent." The great elder suddenly raged. "Whether or not he's crippled, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this time the new prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. "He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others." The great elder replied coldly, "Then flog him 30 times. Very quickly 2 Yi clan guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years and even now he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, "Young master, Yi Lang inherits the title of prince. What are you shouting for?" As he spoke he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up. But she did not cry and only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard quickly bowed. "This subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the prince I'll need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and quickly bowed deeply. "This subordinate is willing to go through fire and water for the prince, even if it means death." Yi Lang nodded. "Drag him away. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't hold back, understand?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu suddenly stopped as if he had seen something. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe and the robe was tattered and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Yi Xian who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes and his face was dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this moment Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Ping. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. Yi Lang did not stop there and charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you!" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, "Prince, save me! Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yiling's side. Seeing Yiling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yiling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Ping! Chapter 886. Yiling let go of Qin Tian and looked to her right. A middle-aged man stood there. He wore a gray robe, held an ancient scroll in his left hand, and held a long brush in his right. He seemed extremely refined and quiet. "The sect master of calligraphy," someone exclaimed with shock. The sect master of calligraphy's original name was Lin Xiaoxiu, and he was one of the 6 original sect masters. He was a top-rate expert of the Worldwide Academy all those years ago. The members of the Worldwide Academy instantly heaved sighs of relief when they saw this person. The current Worldwide Academy wasn't the Worldwide Academy of all those years ago. Even if the Prophet hadn't been there all those years ago, the Shura Empress wouldn't have been able to act so wantonly in the Worldwide Academy. After all, besides the Prophet, there were also countless other experts. Unfortunately, the experts of the Myriad Dimension Academy that could make a move were very few, and it was utterly impossible for these few people to go against the Azura Empress. Fortunately, there was a headmaster who had come. Yiling gazed at Lin Xiaoxiu, and the latter glanced at the surroundings before he chuckled. "Empress, may I know how my Worldwide Academy has offended you to make you so angry?" Yiling didn't say anything and she just flicked her sleeve. Lin Xiaoxiu suddenly tapped lightly with his brush in the air. Bang! An invisible wave suddenly rippled out in front of them. In the next moment, everyone watched as Lin Xiaoxiu retreated repeatedly, and he only stopped after moving almost 3 kilometers back. However, the Shura Empress hadn't moved even half a step. The expressions of the countless experts of the Worldwide Academy instantly fell when they witnessed this scene. The sect master of calligraphy glanced at the brush in his hand, and it had completely cracked open. The sect master of calligraphy gazed at the Shura in the distance. "Empress, do you really intend to destroy my Worldwide Academy?" Lin Xiaoxiu's face was expressionless as she walked slowly towards the sect master of calligraphy. "Wasn't I wanted by the Worldwide Academy?" Venerable calligrapher looked at Qin Tian, who was not far away, and asked, "What happened?" Qin Tian said in a deep voice, "We are after Yi Xian's younger sister, but we didn't expect Yiling to look so similar to the Empress." Reverend Calligraphy frowned slightly. "Put a warrant for Yi Xian's sister? Why?" Qin Tian was silent. At this moment Yiling suddenly said, "He definitely wants to use his sister to threaten her, right?" Speaking up to this point, her expression suddenly became ferocious. Because at this moment she thought of many things. In the lower realms she'd been used to threaten that young man on more than one occasion, and that young man had almost died many times for her sake. When she thought up to here, a strand of indescribable flames of rage suddenly arose in Yiling's heart. In the next moment she suddenly flipped her palm. Boom! At this moment, dozens of academies in the surroundings were directly reduced to ashes. Seeing this scene, Lin Xiaoxiu and Qin Tian's expressions immediately sank. If this Shura Empress didn't give up, it would be a disaster for the Worldwide Academy. Currently, the only person in the Worldwide Academy who could face this Empress head-on was the female teacher. However, they didn't know where the female teacher was. In the distance, Yiling looked around coldly. Finally, her gaze fell on Qin Tian. "Those who used to be in the Worldwide Academy can all be called outstanding people, but you've done such a despicable thing. You've really disgraced the ancestors of the Worldwide Academy." As she spoke, she suddenly clenched her right hand. Boom! In an instant, a powerful force gathered in the area. At the same time, the sky above the Myriad Dimensions Academy suddenly darkened. Countless black clouds gathered, and within those black clouds, countless evil spirits roared. Seeing this scene, all the experts of the Worldwide Academy were shocked. This was the destruction of the Worldwide Academy. Qin Tian's face was full of fear. What had he done? Wasn't he looking for Yiling? Why did he find a killing god? "Empress, please show mercy." At this moment, a voice suddenly came from afar. Soon a man appeared not far from Yiling. The man wore a blue robe, had long hair, and held a black flute in his hand. Lu Shidi. Some of the experts of the Worldwide Academy immediately recognized the man's identity. This man was one of the former 6 headmasters of the Worldwide Academy. Lu Shidi looked at the angry Yiling and quickly cupped his fists. Empress, this is the fault of the Worldwide Academy. Please show mercy. Yiling looked at Lu Shidi without saying a word. The force around them was getting stronger and stronger. Lu Shidi said in a low voice, Empress, please give face to my teacher. Prophet. Yiling frowned slightly. She didn't make a move, but the force around them didn't disappear either. Lu Shidi said again, Empress, my teacher founded the Worldwide Academy for the sake of the 5 dimensions in the world. Although it isn't as good as it used to be, it shouldn't be destroyed just like that. Please give face to my teacher and show mercy. Yiling was silent. Lu Shidi and the others were also silent. They knew that whether or not the Worldwide Academy would be spared depended on Yiling's decision. Of course, the Worldwide Academy wasn't completely defenseless. However, they didn't want to fight to the death. Because once that happened, even if the Worldwide Academy could stop the Empress, it could be said that it would suffer a great deal of damage. At this moment, Yiling suddenly looked up. Above the clouds in the sky, the space there trembled slightly. She frowned slightly and the next moment she disappeared. Seeing the Empress disappear, everyone present heaved a sigh of relief. This Empress of the Shura was really too terrifying. Lu Shidi looked up at the sky and said softly, someone has made a move. Lin Xiaoxiu asked, is it her? Lu Shidi shook his head, I didn't sense her aura. Lin Xiaoxiu was silent. At this moment, Lu Shidi suddenly looked around and said softly, today is a humiliation for the Worldwide Academy. Humiliation. Hearing this, everyone present was silent. Today the Worldwide Academy was almost destroyed by the Empress of the Shura alone. It could be said that this was indeed an extremely humiliating matter. After all, when the Prophet was still around, who would dare to act presumptuously in the Worldwide Academy? Who would dare? Even without the Prophet, the teacher and the others, who would dare to bully the Worldwide Academy at that time? At this moment, Lin Xiaoxiu suddenly looked at Qin Tian who was in soul form nearby. Why are you looking for Yiling? Qin Tian was silent. Lu Shidi suddenly said, although this is a bit despicable, it is not entirely his fault. I have already investigated Zhou Xian. He is not an ordinary person, especially the mysterious swordsman behind him. Her strength is definitely not weaker than ours, maybe even stronger. And Zhou Xian's biggest weakness is that Yiling. If we can find Yiling, we can naturally subdue Zhou Xian with a small price. Unfortunately, we did not expect that Yiling and the Empress of the Shura would look so similar, so much so that we have provoked the Empress. At this point he shook his head. It had to be said that this time the Worldwide Academy's actions were very stupid. It could be said that outsiders would not sympathize with the Worldwide Academy, nor would they think that the Empress of the Shura was bullying others. They would only laugh at the Worldwide Academy for seeking death. Put out a warrant for the Empress of the Shura? Everyone knew that soon, the Worldwide Academy would become the joke of the entire 5th dimension. At this moment, Qin Tian suddenly said, this matter is my fault. Lu Shidi looked at Qin Tian, of course it is your fault. From now on, you are no longer the Academy Master of the Worldwide Academy. At this point he paused and then said, this matter has become so big and so stupid. If I do not punish you, it will be difficult to convince the public. Qin Tian was silent. Lu Shidi looked at Lin Xiaoxiu, you do it. Lin Xiaoxiu shook his head, you know that I do not like to do these troublesome things. You do it. Lu Shidi was silent. Lin Xiaoxiu said again, someone has to bear the responsibility. Lu Shidi nodded, yes. After that he turned to look at a certain place and said softly, we must open the Worldwide Library. Only this treasure vault left behind by teacher is able to change the current situation of our Myriad Dimension Academy. Lin Xiaoxiu said in a deep voice, that World Prison Pagoda is in Zhou Xian's hands and it has already recognized him as its master. Lu Shidi said softly, then take it back. Lin Xiaoxiu looked at Lu Shidi. Lu Shidi smiled and said, that World Prison Pagoda originally belongs to our Worldwide Academy. It is only right and proper for us to take it back, isn't it? Lin Xiaoxiu said in a deep voice. He will not easily hand it over to us. Moreover, from what I know, that pagoda does not seem to be in his hands right now. Lu Shidi smiled. That pagoda has already recognized him as its master. As long as he is willing, that pagoda can return to his hands at any time. Lin Xiaoxu was silent. Not far away, Qin Tian looked at Lu Shidi and Lin Xiaoxu. At this moment he suddenly understood. These people did not come back for the Worldwide Academy. Their real goal was the Worldwide Library. It was teacher's treasury. Thinking of this, Qin Tian shook his head and smiled. At this moment he remembered the words of the prophet. The most unpredictable thing in the world is the human heart. The most volatile thing in the world is also the human heart. At this moment, Qin Tian suddenly felt disheartened. Without thinking much, Qin Tian turned and left. In the distance, Lin Xiaoxu looked at Qin Tian. Lu Shidi said softly, this time he did such a stupid thing. Letting him live is already giving teacher face back then. After saying this, he looked at Lin Xiaoxu. Go inform all the experts of the Worldwide Academy outside. Tell them that our Worldwide Academy has reached a moment of life and death. Lin Xiaoxu frowned. Will they come back? Lu Shidi nodded. They will. Because they won't just watch as the Myriad Dimension Academy declines. Lin Xiaoxu nodded and turned to leave. Lu Shidi turned and looked not far away. That was where the Worldwide Library was located. Inside there were treasures left behind by the prophet. After a moment of silence, Lu Shidi turned and left. After the news of the Shura Empress being wanted by the Worldwide Academy, the entire Worldwide Academy became a laughingstock. The Shura Empress. It could be said that no one wanted to provoke the Shura Empress. Who didn't want to avoid this place? However, the Worldwide Academy actually wanted to arrest the Shura Empress. Wasn't they tired of living? Somewhere in the clouds, Xian was currently fighting with the sword spirit woman. On his back he carried a giant sword and in his hand was a light sword. When fighting with the sword spirit woman, when he used the light sword, his sword was like thunder and as fast as lightning. When he switched to the heavy sword, his style changed abruptly. Under his sword it was as heavy as 1,000 catties, splitting the heavens and splitting the earth. Chapter 887. After practicing for an unknown period of time, Xian stopped. At this moment his whole body was drenched in sweat. Tired. That was how he felt at the moment. Using a heavy sword and a light sword was too taxing on the mind. Especially a heavy sword. Switching to a heavy sword consumed a lot of energy, while a light sword consumed a lot of the soul because a light sword was a flying sword. At this moment the sword spirit woman not far away suddenly said, "You've learned well." Xian looked at the sword spirit woman. The sword spirit said, "But it's still not enough. You haven't switched fast enough. You have to switch fast enough, so fast that the other party can't even react when your sword has switched." Xian nodded. "I understand. I will continue to work hard." The sword spirit nodded. She looked at the executing heaven sword at Xian's waist. "Can I have a look at this sword?" Xian nodded. He took down the executing heaven sword and handed it to the sword spirit. The sword spirit took the executing heaven sword. She gently stroked the sword and said softly, "Your sword is really sharp." Xian smiled. "Miss Sword Spirit, as far as I know, you are also a sword, right?" The sword spirit looked at Xian. "Yes." Xian said, "Can I have a look at the sword spirit's real body?" The sword spirit shook her head slightly. "In terms of sharpness, I can't compare to your sword. In terms of realm, I can't compare to the sword that hurt me before." As she spoke, she handed the executing heaven sword to Xian. "You have great luck. You have a sword that others can never have in their lifetime. You must cherish it." Xian took the executing heaven sword and said, "There's another sword." With that he took out the soul-suppressing sword. When she saw the soul-suppressing sword, a trace of surprise flashed in the sword spirit's eyes. "This sword's soul." As she spoke, she looked at Xian. "You're amazing. One sword is extremely sharp and the other sword can restrain the soul." Xian smiled. "I'm lucky." The sword spirit nodded. "Both swords are very good. Treasure them well." As she spoke, she seemed to have thought of something. She looked at the soul-suppressing sword and said softly, "If you use this sword to perform Master Sword Soul skill, the power will not be ordinary." Xian said seriously, "That's what I think too. However, can I cultivate sword soul skills now?" The sword spirit said, "There's no hurry. The most important thing for you now is to practice your sword rules well. You have to practice switching between the heavy sword and the light sword to the extreme. Moreover, you have to learn to switch at the right time and not switch at will. Also, you have to find the right time to use your immeasurable sword and strive to kill when you strike. Understand? Boundless sword. Yi Xian nodded. He hadn't grasped the timing of the boundless sword well. The boundless sword was a flying sword. After using the heart sword mantra, its speed was much faster than before. Moreover, the distance it could cover was also much greater. However, this sword strike had to be timed in order to kill in one strike. Opportunity. To put it simply, it required combat experience. The sword spirit looked at Lian Wanli. If you too practice it, it will be very beneficial to you as well. The corners of Lian Wanli's mouth curled up slightly. That's exactly what I was thinking. As soon as she finished speaking, she opened her palm, and the azure dragon saber suddenly appeared in her hand. She looked at Yi Xian and without any nonsense she slashed the saber towards Yi Xian. The azure dragon roared as she swung the saber. In the distance, the corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly, and he directly vanished on the spot. A ray of sword light flashed across the field. Bang! An explosion suddenly resounded in the field. After the sword spirit glanced at the two of them, she turned to look outside. After a while she walked outside. In next to no time she arrived outside and a middle-aged man stood not too far away from her. The middle-aged man had a saber hanging horizontally behind his waist. The middle-aged man glanced behind the sword spirit. "Where is this?" The sword spirit looked at the middle-aged man and asked in reply, "Who are you?" The middle-aged man said, "I'm here. This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page." Qin Yiming. If there were outsiders here, they would definitely be shocked. Qin Yiming was a famous saber cultivator in the fifth dimension. He was known as the Saber Monarch and he was also one of the 6 leaders of the Worldwide Academy. Unfortunately, the sword spirit in front of him did not recognize him. The sword spirit looked at Qin Yiming. "This place does not welcome outsiders." Qin Yiming shook his head. "The person I am looking for is inside." The sword spirit slightly frowned. "Yi Xian?" Qin Yiming nodded. "It's him." The sword spirit suddenly disappeared, and a ray of sword light slashed towards Qin Yiming. In front of him, Qin Yiming lightly took a step back, and his body slightly leaned to the side, dodging the sword by a hair's breadth. However, at this moment, that ray of sword light suddenly slashed horizontally. The sound of air being torn suddenly resounded. But this sword slashed empty air. The sword spirit looked in front of him and Qin Yiming had unknowingly retreated a few meters. The sword spirit looked at Qin Yiming and she suddenly disappeared. The space in front of Qin Yiming suddenly split open, and a ray of sword light appeared. Qin Yiming's face was expressionless. His right hand suddenly grabbed forward and then he squeezed. This squeeze directly caught a ray of sword light. The next moment he lightly exerted force with 2 fingers. Bang! The ray of sword light shattered and a figure retreated explosively. It was the sword spirit. When the sword spirit stopped, she looked at Qin Yiming and at this moment, there was a trace of seriousness in her eyes. This person in front of her had crushed her without even drawing his saber. She wasn't a match for him. Very strong. At this moment Qin Yiming suddenly said, "You aren't the person I want to kill. Tell the Yi Xian to come out." The sword spirit was about to speak, but at this moment Yi Xian walked out from not too far away. When she saw Yi Xian, the sword spirit said in a low voice, "This person is very strong." Yi Xian nodded and he looked at the distant Qin Yiming. At this moment, Lian Qian's voice suddenly resounded in his mind. "It's the Saber Monarch. This person is extremely strong and you aren't a match for him." "Not a match for him." Yi Xian's face sank. "Miss Lian Qian, this is too much of a blow to me." Lian Qian said in a low voice, "You really aren't a match for him." Yi Xian looked at Qin Yiming and said softly, "Even if I'm not a match for him, I still have to fight." Lian Qian was silent. At this moment Qin Yiming looked at Yi Xian. He sized up Yi Xian and slightly nodded. No wonder Qin Tian was helpless. "Not bad. Come, draw your sword." Draw his sword. Yi Xian looked at Qin Yiming. He opened his palm and the book world appeared in his hand. At this moment, Qin Yiming suddenly said, "Don't use this." As soon as he finished speaking, his realm was directly suppressed to the universe realm. This realm was the same as Yi Xian's current realm and even lower than Qin Tian's realm. Yi Xian was silent. The other party was very confident. At this moment Lian Qian said, "Be careful." Yi Xian nodded and he looked at Qin Yiming. He suddenly disappeared and the next moment, a sword slashed at Qin Yiming. Qin Yiming took a step back with his right foot. This step was very slow as if he was taking a stroll. However, it was this step that allowed Yi Xian's sword to slash at thin air. Yi Xian's sword slashed at thin air but he didn't stop. He leaped up and the sword in his hand stabbed forward as fast as lightning. Opposite Yi Xian, Qin Yiming moved sideways, and Yi Xian's sword slashed at thin air again. However, at this moment Yi Xian's sword suddenly flew out. Immeasurable sword. With regards to this sword, Yi Xian was very confident because the person in front of him was too arrogant. And the opponent's arrogance was his chance. Therefore, after 2 consecutive failures, he directly used Immeasurable sword for the third sword. However, he was dumbfounded when he unleashed the attack. No. This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. In the distance, Qin Yiming was still standing there holding a blade in his hand and this blade was blocking a sword. It was blocked. Yi Xian looked at Qin Yiming. Although his expression was calm, his heart was in turmoil. Qin Yiming said softly, "Your sword is not bad. Whether it is the timing, speed or power, they are all top-notch." Yi Xian said, "You were sent by Qin Tian?" Qin Yiming shook his head. "He can't order me around, I came to find you myself." Yi Xian looked at Qin Yiming. "You are the one who wants to kill me." Qin Yiming nodded. "Come, continue to attack." Yi Xian nodded. "Okay." As his voice faded, he suddenly disappeared. In the distance, Qin Yiming unhurriedly placed the blade in his hand behind his back. At this moment, a ray of sword light appeared in front of his eyebrows, and he used his fingers to clamp it. He was very confident, because Yi Xian's sword speed wasn't enough to threaten him. However, at this moment, the sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly turned into a heavy sword, and he used 2 fingers to clamp this heavy sword. However, the strength of this sword was completely different. Bang! Qin Yiming instantly retreated several meters. After he stopped, he looked at his right hand. His entire right hand was full of cracks. Yi Xian's sword just now almost destroyed his entire right hand. Qin Yiming looked at Yi Xian. "Very interesting." Yi Xian put away his heavy sword and changed to a light sword. His figure suddenly disappeared and he once again used the Immeasurable sword. In the distance, bang! Yi Xian's sword was blocked by Qin Yiming's blade. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly pulled out the heavy sword from his back and fiercely slashed forward. Qin Yiming didn't retreat, he used his blade to block. Bang! A strong force exploded in front of the two of them. This time, Qin Yiming didn't retreat even half a step, while Yi Xian returned to his original position. However, the moment he stopped, the sword in his hand flew out again. The Immeasurable sword. In the distance, Qin Yiming used his blade to block. Bang! Yi Xian's sword was directly deflected, but Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of Qin Yiming. He held the deflected sword and fiercely slashed forward. At this moment, Qin Yiming suddenly used his blade to block. Bang! Before Yi Xian's sword landed, he felt a sharp pain in his chest. Then he once again returned to his original position. Yi Xian was silent. From start to finish, this person in front of him didn't draw his blade. If the other party had drawn his blade, he would already be dead. Qin Yiming suddenly walked towards Yi Xian. "According to what I know, within the same year, there aren't many who are more outstanding than you. Unfortunately, you are my academy's enemy." Yi Xian suddenly said, "Have you ever thought about why I became your academy's enemy?" Qin Yiming stopped and looked at Yi Xian. "Because that tower is in your hands." Yi Xian smiled. "Why is that tower in my hands?" Qin Yiming was silent. In a certain space, Lian Qian shook her head. This guy, if he could win, he wouldn't talk nonsense. If he couldn't win, he would reason. At this moment, Yi Xian added, "Because the tower recognized me as its master." "Sir, is it my fault or the academy's fault that the tower recognized me as its master? Or is it teacher's fault?" Qin Yiming frowned slightly. "Teacher?" Yi Xian said seriously, "To be honest, I am teacher's new student. Moreover, I have received teacher's inheritance and control most of the Tao laws. Strictly speaking, you should call me junior. Do you really want us to fight each other?" Lian Qian. P.S. Let me ask everyone a question. What is your average monthly income? I want to see what kind of industry is more popular. End of this chapter. That you're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.